If I gavelled you, gavelled
Mike's on.
We're going to call the regular meeting to order, the Methuen City Council regular meeting Monday, November 18th, 2019, at 7 o'clock p.m. in the Great Hall of the Searles Building. The clerk will call the roll.
Council McCarty.
here.
Council Saber.
Here.
Council Vidla.
Here.
Council Ziegler.
Here.
Council Campagnon.
Here.
Council Finicaro.
Here.
Council Hamilton's absent. Council Kazanjian.
Here.
And Chairperson Canan.
Here.
One absent.
Acceptance of the agenda. I need a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Council Campagnon, second from Council Vidla. Any discussion on this? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Invocation, Pledge of Allegiance.
Eternal God, we pray that you bless us in this meeting and keep us. Lord, make your face shine upon us and be gracious to us. We pray that we feel your presence during this meeting because you are with us wherever we go. We pray that this meeting focuses upon you and your plans for our city. Let our actions in this meeting be valuable to our aim, which is to build up and conduct business in the best interest of the city. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
And can we please stand and have a moment of silence for Fire Lieutenant Jason Menard? We lost him in the Worcester fire. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Bringing that to my attention. Reading and acceptance of minutes, October 21st, 2019, regular meeting. I need a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Council Campagnon, second from Council Ziegler. Any discussion on those? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Let the record state that Council McCarty was out of the room. And now the November 7th regular meeting.
So moved.
I have a motion from Councilor Ziegler,
Second.
second from Council Campagnon. Any discussion on these minutes? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous again, but Council McCarty is out of the room. Under proclamations and correspondence, the Vice Chair will read a correspondence into the record.
Tonight, Madam Chair, we have two pieces of correspondence. The first correspondence is from Ronnie Hayden. November 15th, 2019, to Mayor Jajuga and the Methuen City Council. I've been using the Methuen transfer station for over 20 years for my business and personal needs. This year, it is being operated in a very professional manner. Everything is pushed back neatly, and the entire area is kept very clean. Bob, Gary, and Karina are always very professional and courteous. Aside from that, no one I have seen has been allowed to enter without paying by check or presenting a valid permit, which is exactly how it should be. I just wanted to let you know the good operation that's going on. Thanks, signed, Ronnie Hayden. P.O. Box 238, Methuen, Mass. 01844. Second piece of correspondence was received in the council office from Dracut Selectmen, Board of Selectmen Jesse Forcier, Chairman. Town of Dracut Board of Selectmen hearing notice. In accordance with the Town of Dracut zoning bylaws and the Town of Dracut general bylaws, Chapter 28, notice is hereby given that a public hearing will be held by the Board of Selectmen on Tuesday, November 26, 2019 at 7:30 p.m. at Town Hall, 62 Arlington Street, on the application of Lazy River Products, LLC, for amendment to special permit number 19-7 to relocate the retail facility operations to the rear of 145 Broadway Road building, to revise the manufacturing production facility at the 155 Broadway Road building, and amend parking, traffic, and security plans at the 145-155 Broadway Road, Dracut, Mass. To obtain this document in an alternative format, Braille, large print, etc., or to make a reasonable accommodation, hearing device, signer, etc., please contact ADA Officer Christine Lindberg at 978-453-9492, signed Board of Selectmen Jesse Forcier. It was posted in the Lowell Sun legal notices to be advertised twice on November 12th as well as November 19th, 2019.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is presentations. We have Sean Cronin, our Fiscal Stability Officer, who will, I guess, present the health insurance presentation. Thank you. Okay, yes, please come up.
So instead of Sean, I just want to give a quick,
Okay,
just
fine.
a reminder to council. This
Just speak
is-
right into that
Yeah,
microphone
yeah.
so that they can
So
hear
we
you at
can
home.
hear.
Is that better? Better?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. So I just want to introduce NFP, who is the consultant that the city hired to look at employee benefits and health plans, both for current employees and for retirees. This was something that we did, I think we engaged with them back in late spring, and so this is just the final results of that report. The city's not ready to make recommendations at this point, but this is informational, and so we're just providing the results of this
Great.
through this presentation. So.
Thank you. And just, who's coming up?
Good evening. Thank you. I'm Ken Lombardi, and this is Kevin Pecos. We're from NFP. Oops. We've prepared a PowerPoint presentation for you this evening. I think you have a copy of it. Try and go through some of these slides as well. Obviously,
We have it right there.
okay,
too, right in
great.
front of us.
Obviously, we understand that there's a significant amount of information. We tried to condense it. I'll try not to take up too much of your time this evening, and we're certainly here to answer any questions you may have about the information. As Maggie had mentioned, our firm's been engaged with the city of Methuen probably since the spring of this year, and the scope of the project was to kind of take a look at the employee insurance, health insurance program, active employees and retirees, make some comments. And what we tried to do is to reduce this down to a series of slides that kind of outlines what we would suggest to be savings opportunities for the city and the employees. And so we're trying to kind of capitalize that here this evening. So just a few things, not that we need to give you our resume, but our firm's been involved in providing health insurance consulting to municipalities since 1981. I've been involved with the firm since 2000. My background is the insurance business. We started out in this organization as EBS Foreign. 2014, we were acquired by a national company called National Financial Partners, NFP. I run the municipal practice out of the Northborough office. Our team manages currently about 70 municipalities. Some of those are in this geographic area. Just by way of background, the groups that we manage are similar to the city of Methuen in that they're self-insured. We have plans that have direct insurance contracts with the various local carrier marketplace. Some of our clients are in the Group Insurance Commission. Some of our clients are in joint purchasing arrangements, another way that communities could buy health insurance in Massachusetts. One of them is called the Mass Interlocal Insurance Association, Hampshire County Group Insurance Trust. Those are two of the larger ones in the state behind the Group Insurance Commission. And we manage some joint purchasing arrangements ourselves. So the point of that information is just to kind of let you folks know we have a considerable amount of experience. Kevin, who is one of our staff employees, is also involved in health insurance consulting and also has a municipal background, being an ex-town manager for about 150 years, Kevin?
Only 42.
So we think we have enough experience to kind of help and provide counsel. Without going into too much detail, really the important step here is to establish the baseline of information that we're looking at. So City of Methuen has pretty complicated health insurance program in that it has to cover quite a few employees and retirees. Currently, the plan is self-insured through Blue Cross Blue Shield of Massachusetts. The city procures stop-loss coverage to protect some of the risk of the plan. There is also a separate health reimbursement arrangement provided by the city to the employees to help fund some out-of-pocket expenses. the city does do business with Canadian drug companies to re-import drugs that are cost beneficial to the members. All of the plans that are in question renew on July 1st as far as the active employee plans are considered. Current splits are HMO enrollees 6238, PPO at 6436. There's 896 subscribers as of the last time we looked at the enrollment. Most of the folks are on the PPO style plan, which is open access, doesn't require gatekeeper enrollment at this point. There's a few individuals on the HMO plan, and the city offers a Medicare supplement plan to those MedX retirees. We'll be talking about those later on in the presentation. All told, we're looking at roughly 1,500 or so subscribers, so it's obviously a huge organization. I did try to put some financial information in just to, again, set the baseline. I want to be cautious that what we're presenting to you here is simply a number to create a baseline for reference points today. We weren't employed to study the city's healthcare trust fund. Pretty much that's a big checking account that handles all the expenses of the health plan between the city contributions and the member contributions. Within that healthcare trust fund are a number of line items. This would be one of them, and obviously the largest number in question. We just kind of took a snapshot of how the financial picture looks today at a point in time. And what this information shows is the enrollments by the various plan options. The mode of enrollment is on two-tier, individual and family. We have the current monthly costs that were established for working rates, if you will, for contributions and city contributions as of fiscal year 20 on July 1st. Then you can see that there's a city share split and the member share split. And the point of this is that we're looking at roughly $19.8 million of healthcare spend between the city and the members. And that number is designed to cover all the expenses of the plan, including the claims costs, reinsurance costs, administrative costs. There should be some other services provided within the healthcare trust fund that are probably built into those premium rates. And you can see when the city share split is apportioned, and then against the member, it's roughly $13 million and $6.8 million when it comes to the total. I've also shown you what the member monthly cost is, and that'll be important to look at as we look at some of the savings opportunities. And you can see what the member's monthly cost is, and that's shown over there on the right. Any questions so far? Thank you. So after digesting a ton of information that was provided to us by the city, and then directly from Blue Cross Blue Shield, the insurance advisor, the insurance carrier, we kind of came up with three things that we thought the city and the members should consider. By no means are these the only things that should be of consideration, but we wanted to put three, if you will, game plan ideas in front of the membership and the city council to try and evaluate. There are no guarantees with any of these recommendations to the cost savings that we're going to discuss. Through our experience, we kind of infer to you what we think the end result might be if some of these things were being considered. Obviously, you might notice during the presentation that we'll spend a significant amount of time on the Group Insurance Commission option. There are other options, though, that we want to put in front of the City Council that could be of consideration going forward. A couple of things that we wanted to make sure you're clear on. When we talk about considering moving the healthcare plan to the State Group Insurance Commission, what that does mean is terminating our arrangement with Blue Cross Blue Shield and replacing it with roughly 16 plan options, pretty much the original marketplace of options for employees. We have a number of communities that are in the GIC, and we have some experience in how the forecasting method works and how the actual enrollment into the GIC ends up. So that's one of the initiatives we'll spend some time on. Secondarily, because we recall that the city does need to collectively bargain with the Public Employee Committee on any of these recommendations, we wanted to put some other ideas in front of you. One of them was, right now, there's a predominance of enrollment into a PPO-style plan, which is atypical in Massachusetts municipalities, if you will. There may be some issue for that being the fact that this is a border community, but what we do observe with the rest of our clients is that the majority of enrollees are in the HMO-style plan, and I'll further define the difference between an HMO and the PPO later on in the presentation. But one of the things we would put in front of you is that there are some significant beneficial programs that Blue Cross Blue Shield, for instance, offers that, in working with Blue Cross, has recommended a premium cost savings if they were implemented, and I've made a note there of about 5% of the savings that would inure to both the city and to the members. And then finally, and I believe this initiative might actually be underway already, we've had some success over the last several years where we've identified with cities and towns and school districts where there actually were subscribers hired prior to 1986, April 1st, if you will, where the state did not require governmental employees to contribute to the Medicare tax situation. So in other words, there were employees who didn't qualify for Medicare Part A free because they didn't pay a 1.45% Medicare tax. Our state law requires that if you are retired and you have access to free Medicare, that you're moved off of an active employee plan and into a Medicare supplement plan. One of the things we identified is a number of retirees. I think we said there were about 29 or so who we thought it would be cost effective for the city to actually go out and buy Medicare for this membership, actually pay the cost to be able for them to be eligible, and then transition to a Medicare supplement plan. Two benefits to that are the retirees enjoy better benefits and lower costs for contributions. The city would enjoy, obviously, lower costs as well for this age group and demographic. And although we can't provide you with an actuarial estimate, we do know that your consulting actuary would value your OPEB costs on a reduced level once this population moved. It's a rare opportunity where we can kind of make win-win recommendations for everyone. Some slight differences in the Medicare supplement plan versus the active plan, and we can kind of go over those as well. Okay, so the first, obviously, initiative was to consider the Group Insurance Commission. There are, I think, about 40 or so municipal organizations that are currently involved in the Group Insurance Commission, or in other words, they've moved their plan locally from whatever option was available to give the employees all of the options that the Group Insurance Commission offers state employees. So the very easiest way, I guess, to explain this is if this were a recommendation that was agreed upon, then using the current July 1 of 2019 rates, if you will, from the GIC, your employees and their family members would look at all of these plan options as options for July 1st of 2020, for instance. And you can see that there's actually 12 different plans. There's a number of different insurance carrier names. There's a number of different style plans between narrow network plans, indemnity style, broad network, regional networks, and then you can see the corresponding rates that the city employees and the city would contribute to. So any community that joins the Group Insurance Commission pays these rates. And the city does not have the ability to say to the membership, we're only going to offer Fallon Select Care or Direct Care. This becomes a myriad of options that any of the employees can search through, check the network availability, and depending on location of where they live, have access to these various coverages. Just as a reference point, you can see that there's some premium rates that are higher and there's some premium rates that are lower. Remember that the current cost here in Methuen is $852 individual for the PPO most dominated plan, and then $2147 family. So you will obviously notice that the GIC rates are less than the current Methuen plan today. There's also a senior plan option. So the way the Group Insurance Commission works is if the city and the subscribers decided to move to the GIC, it's the entire active employee population as well as the Medicare retirees. So the entire group would move to the GIC effective July 1st, for instance. And the senior plan, although we won't be spending a lot of time on that particular program, has very similar rates as the GIC offers as well. Currently, retirees are afforded a Medicare supplement plan called MedX through Blue Cross Blue Shield, one plan and one rate for all. There may be some plan options within this segment where the seniors might find better benefits at lower cost if they decided to enroll in any of these options. But more importantly, the Medicare supplement plan that we have today is replicated through the GIC as well. A couple of things, and this is something where I think we'll probably spend a little bit of time on. We're looking at some global costs, assuming the city of Methuen had considered the GIC for fiscal year 20. We're going to kind of look at this in three different areas, if you will. So the first comment that needs to be made is this is an aspirational review. We're making recommendations based on historical data that we've studied. We're making recommendations based on information that we've garnered from the Group Insurance Commission themselves. And then we're just kind of using some information based on historical data, what happens in the municipal marketplace. So if you can look at this bar chart, roughly what we're saying to you is the current city spend is about $19.8 million, and that's the first green bar, if you will, on the left-hand side. And then you can see that what we're showing you is the city spend is, again, $13 million, and the member spend is roughly $6.7 million. What we then have done is we've remodeled the enrollment, assuming, again, the city moved to the GIC, and you'll see that there's two different estimates. So the light green estimate takes all of the current municipal employees within the GIC based on the percentage of where these folks are enrolled. Unicare Indemnity, Tufts Navigator, Harvard Pilgrim Independence, Fallon Select Care, Fallon Direct Care, Always Health Plan. So when we modeled it based on just where all the other municipalities are, you can see that the overall spend would probably go from 19.7 down to about $16.6 million. And the city share would be about 11.1, and the members would go down to about 5.4. So this replicates the actual or the same percentage of enrollment based on how we kind of took your current employees and put them into these plan options. And then what we also did in working with the GIC is to see, since we're in a neighboring community to Haverhill, is how does Haverhill's enrollment look? And if we mimicked exactly how they are sized up in the GIC, what would our cost be? And when we did that, the rates, the costs actually dropped down about $16.2 million, the city share about 10.8, and the member share at about 5.3. This assumes the same current the same contribution as we currently have within the PPO plan, so that would be the 64-36% share. What this does presume is, obviously, we've scattered out how the enrollment would look. What we do want to make sure you're clear on is that the risk to the city in this endeavor is that we cannot guarantee where the membership would actually end up. Is it possible that some folks would enroll in some more expensive plans? It is possible. I don't believe it's likely. I think what we're looking at for potential savings is somewhere between where the municipality distribution list is and then where Haverhill ended up. Yep.
As the council is probably aware, the Chapter 32B, the law that governs municipal employee health insurance, changed some years ago with the so-called Municipal Health Reform Act, modifying sections 21 through 23 of 32B, offering an opportunity for cities and towns to opt into the GIC or a GIC look-alike program. At its height, approximately 72 cities and towns had moved into the GIC. Now, as Ken says, because we can't crystal ball if your employees, if Methuen were to go to the GIC and your employees were to enroll in those plans, we can't guarantee exactly which plans they will enroll in. Thus, this is an estimate. What we can tell you, the experience of those 72-odd cities and towns that went in, invariably, was that employees tended to enroll in the plan in the GIC that was closest to, similar to, the one they were in when they left the plan they were formerly in before they entered the GIC. And because they did that, and because the GIC rates are generally much better, the savings to those 72 cities and towns was very substantial. In point of fact, every single one of them saved money or they wouldn't have opted into the GIC to begin with. So you may hear people represent or say there are no guarantees. Yes, of course, there are no guarantees. But the overwhelming history demonstrates that employees act in a self-enlightened, intelligent manner, enroll in plans that are similar to theirs. They don't go up in premium. That wouldn't make a lot of sense. And the savings to both the employee and the city is very substantial, and that's been replicated over and over. Thanks, Ken.
Any questions on that slide before we move on?
Council Finicaro?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, I just wanted to clarify on this page 7, the light green deemed city. I just wanted to understand if you talked about different variables. Is that estimate for the GIC municipal city example, is that using an average of different plans? Is that using the average of plans that they're most likely to choose because it's similar to Methuen, or is that assuming most expensive plans?
So the question, great question. Obviously, what we did in the light green is the GIC told us, based on which of the plan options are made available to a municipality, how many or what is the percentage of each community that have elected a Unicare Indemnity Plan, Harvard Pilgrim, Independence, the Tufts Navigator. So we knew that 27% of the population was going to jump to the Tufts Navigator, 20% would go to the Harvard Pilgrim Independence. And I've got some percentages to show you how that actually sorted out on the next slide. But what we tried to do is, most municipalities ended up with this distribution model and replicated it here. Then we went one step further. We went to the distribution model in Haverhill, a little bit more aggressive, and that's, so we've used those two as estimates.
All right, thank you.
Okay. If you look at the next slide, so a couple things to keep in mind. 81% of the membership lives in Massachusetts. And as a result of that, the majority of the plan options that are made available are available to the entire, that 81% membership, if you will. The way this would sort out using the Haverhill model, for instance, as you can see that the Unicare Community Choice and Unicare Plus are the two plans that would dominate the enrollment likely here in Methuen as well. A couple of things. These two plans are available in both New Hampshire and in Massachusetts. What's interesting is we were concerned about network access for the membership, but the Unicare is actually Blue Cross Blue Shield or Anthem Blue Cross Blue Shield nationally. So we would suggest that we would not see a significant or any disruption for the membership from the current Blue Cross Blue Shield population. If there were to be some of that disruption, there's other plan options that would be made available. Again, if you're looking at the Haverhill distribution, this is the way it all kind of sorted out. The Tufts Navigator, which is the purple shaded area, that is the most dominated plan within the GIC today, continues to have the majority of the population. But these other smaller plans are starting to gain some traction. Always Health Plan, the former Neighborhood Health Plan, is a significant player in this marketplace, has network access. We did a disruption analysis based on the top utilization of providers under Blue Cross Blue Shield, and just about all of the carriers that we are looking at have responded that most of the providers, if not all, are included in the healthcare plan options. It would require, though, some education of the membership to make sure that the distribution enrollment was accurate. This is really an important slide, and I hope I explain this correctly, because what we want to make sure is that on slide 9, the reason why a community and its membership would consider the GIC is the GIC has almost 500,000 members in its health plans, continues to have some of the best performing renewals annually. I think the last time we checked, about an average of 3% over the last 7 or 8 years. They have had 1 or 2 years where they've had higher rate increases than we would have otherwise expected. And they did take some corrective plan action, I think, in 2011 or 2012 with some slight modifications. But the amount of savings that the membership could enjoy if they were able to select these plan options is significant. This model works this way. The premium differences between the GIC minus the current Methuen rate, annualized would be what the employees would see here. So you can see that for folks that could enroll in the Tough Spirit plan, for instance, families could save almost $3,500 a year over their current costs. Fallon Direct Care, about $2,800. Always Health Plan, You can see families about $2,200 and individuals about $937. So this would be a guaranteed premium reduction in their an annual costs compared to where they are today based on Methuen's current rates. 81% of the population would have access to these plans. So this particular page does indicate regional and network plans. So this is what the GIC would describe as plans that folks that have narrow network use, neighborhood health or always health plan, I should say, or Fallon Direct Care or Select Care, this would be a plan selection option for that enrollee. If you go to the next page, we needed to expand this to include what's the impact to the broad network of national plans. These particular plans, most of the membership would have access to both locally in Massachusetts and New Hampshire. You can see that other than Harvard Pilgrim Independence and the Unicare Indemnity Plan, that the other plans would still create some savings as well. It is obvious that the more expensive Unicare Indemnity Plan could come with a cost increase. That plan is actually available to folks that live outside of the service area. We would have, obviously, people that maybe are early retirees and don't reside locally. This could be a plan option that they would elect. Interestingly enough, the city of Haverhill does not have any enrollees in that last plan. Everybody else is in the other plan options that we're looking at. Obviously, we're talking about access, network style plan, involvement. I also wanted to make sure that we spend some time talking about what are the benefit structure that the GIC currently offers in relation to how the city of Methuen's plan works. So what we're looking at is really just the PPO city plan. That's where the predominant enrollment is, and you can see that plan is way over on the right. This is a traditional combination copay and deductible style plan. You can see that there's a number of medical services where there's a copay plan cost only, office visits and prescription drugs and emergency room. Facility services are subject to a $1,500 deductible if you have individual coverage, limited to $3,000 if you have family coverage. The city does have a HRA arrangement where half of that deductible or up to half of that deductible is paid back. So this is the plan construction that's currently in effect and has probably been worked on with the city and the Public Employee Committee. The Tufts Navigator Plan reference is meant to indicate that since that's the most popular plan within the GIC, this becomes the core plan construct, if you will, for most of the other GIC plans. It does work on a tiered basis. So what that means is when you go to your provider, they're rated by the individual carriers based on various levels of copays. Obviously, those with high quality and low cost would come with a lower copay. There's an incentive to try to search to use lower cost and high quality providers, and the GIC does charge members more if they decide to use a higher level provider. There is also a lower deductible, but there are copays after facility services. You can see that there's levels for inpatient and outpatient. All hospital facilities in Massachusetts are rated at tier 1, 2, and 3, and as you might expect, Mass General might be the most expensive. Local community-based hospitals typically are at a lower cost sharing. There's some slight benefits too. Obviously, prescription drug copays are slightly less on the lower ends for the GIC. But regardless of the plan that the member elects, Fallon, whether it's Harvard Pilgrim or Tufts, this would be the core plan construction. Any questions yet? So that sort of concludes the GIC. I mean, we could certainly go into a tremendous amount of detail on that, but I wanted to make sure we spent some time looking at the other initiatives as well. One of the things that we've been studying in conjunction with working with Blue Cross Blue Shield, the current plan detailed today, as I mentioned, is a PPO or preferred provider option. And what that simply means is there's 2 levels of benefits for members. At time of claim, if they select a contracted provider, then there's a sort of HMO-style looking benefit level. But they do have the ability to go out of network and seek a provider that's not contracted with Blue Cross Blue Shield. Although when we spent some time with Blue Cross, I think about 95 to 97% of all the services are in fact used by network providers, or in other words, the same providers that have access to an HMO. There's no cost difference in the submitted expense from either a PPO provider, or if there is from an HMO provider, it's not generally significant. The reason why we're suggesting that maybe the city of Methuen kind of look at becoming more traditional in the way it looks at its plan options is that we really should have a majority of the subscribers in an HMO setting. When we obviously work with carriers like Blue Cross or Harvard or Tufts or whoever it is, I've outlined sort of the reasons or the theories, if you will, as to why coordinated care can generally provide overall better results and lower long-term cost savings. Blue Cross has indicated an estimate of at least a 5% reduction in cost if we moved everyone that's currently on the PPO and can move to an HMO model of plan design without changing the core structure. That's roughly an $830,000 savings to the healthcare plan by making a change that doesn't necessarily disrupt anyone's utilization.
One of the things we do spend a lot of time doing in other communities is doing employee education. Very often situations like this, which are anomalous in comparison to other communities, the more norm, is due to a lack of employee education, or the fact that there's some assumptions going on about why employees would enroll in this PPO versus the HMO plan. There's sort of a bias that we all have, which is cultural, and it's really a product of advertising, that if a health plan is more expensive, it must be better. The PPO is more expensive. As Ken has been saying for the last few minutes, it is not better with respect to benefits or providers or in any other way an advantage to the employee. In point of fact, the HMO provides the same level of benefits at a cheaper price, and we suspect that a good, strengthful employee education effort, purely voluntary, will allow the employees to embrace the HMOs and reverse this current unusual situation where you've got vast majority of the employees in PPOs, small number in HMOs, which is exactly what pretty much the rest of the world, the opposite of what the rest of the world is doing. So we think good, intense employee education will benefit them greatly and benefit the city as well.
Thanks, Kev. Any questions?
Yes.
Council Saber?
So I guess I'm trying to look at how the employees are going to respond to this, the city itself. And but when you say that an HMO, my understanding of a PPO and an HMO is, number one, the insured can pick their own specialist or don't have to wait to go through the primary care physician and go through their secretaries and wait for a response, and that also they have a more broad selection of doctors, whereas an HMO, you have to be on the list. Is that correct?
So, a couple things.
I'm one of the people that needs the education. So.
Sure. So, yes, number one is an HMO would require that when you, and we would recommend a positive open enrollment, if you will, in order to manage this, is we would ask you to select a primary care physician. That would be step number one. That PCP within a referral circle, within a group practice, would direct ongoing care through a specialist. Yes, you would have to sort of follow, if you will, the recommended course of treatment. The reason why we make this with a little bit more confidence than we typically would is that we're already using a majority of all of the doctors, as I said, about 95 to 97% anyways. We have yet to see, or it's been quite some time since we've seen a member denied care through a specialist. Not necessarily because of the health plan, but because of the group practice at some point or another is in business and does want you to go through their particular referral circle for financial reasons. So I think that's more of an issue that we may encounter than someone not getting to a specialist per se in this particular instance. I'm not going to say that it won't happen. It is possible that we may get a member who is denied a particular service, but medical necessity is the same between the HMO and the PPO under Blue Cross Blue Shield's process. So even today, if I decide I want to go get an MRI, I may be denied that service anyways if I didn't do prior authorization, concurrent review, all those same utilization things that have always been around. Point well taken. Obviously, we do need to make sure that the group is educated. We would still have the two plan options. I think our goal here through education would be to try and move as many people, if not all, into the HMO. Again, because of the geographic area. HMO Blue New England covers all the same providers that we have today. So it should not be an issue.
It's The days of having this convoluted, complex process of getting a referral to a specialist or a hospital pretty much ended a number of years ago. The network for the HMO and the PPO for a given carrier is the same network. What you get with the PPO is you get the opportunity to refer outside the network, self-refer, but you pay a heavy premium for that in the form of deductibles and co-pays and extra premium. Today, if you're in an HMO, and there's a reason why everybody working in the business professionally is in an HMO, everybody's in them, is because if you want a referral, you call your doctor's office, typically an answering machine, you leave the name of the doctor, the number, there's a code for each doctor, and the date you want to go. And that's it. That's the referral process today in the year 2019. It's not you have an office visit, you have to ask permission. It's just leave a message and it's done.
One point I do want to make, and I put this slide back up, what's interesting is your comment about choice. So these particular broad network national plans, this does come with choice. So these plans today don't currently require that you enroll with a primary care physician. They do have an in-network and out-of-network benefit. So what's interesting is if that's an impediment to the recommendation, the Group Insurance Commission option might satisfy that. Say, okay, if we really think it's important to have choice between my primary care or whomever, and I want access to any provider, then these plans do give you access no matter where you go.
Okay, and then, and assuming that we got everybody onto an HMO plan, on average, your experience, what percentage of employees are we gonna hear from that say, I can no longer go to my regular doctor, I have to pick a new primary care doctor?
Well, we really don't have that issue when we're dealing with Blue Cross Blue Shield. If I were here to recommend that we go to a narrow network plan, we would absolutely have that concern. One of the reasons why we're making the recommendation to operate, one of the savings options within the current carrier, is to remove the whole issue about whether or not I'm going to lose a provider access. What might likely be the better option is if I wanted to go see a specialist that my doctor wouldn't send me, we would encourage the member to change primary care physicians if they could. We know that some practices don't accept new patients, but that is an option to be able to work with Blue Cross to be able to get to another specialist as well.
We do know at the top of that slide, because we've been given the information by Blue Cross, that 95% of your employees' healthcare utilization dollars are being spent in network now. But, so that means with the HMO, that same 95% would be spent in network, but at a much reduced premium to both the city and the employee.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Campagnone?
Yes. Through you, Madam Chair, to, I don't know, maybe you could direct me to the right person.
Oh, how about the
I
presenters?
would just like to know how our employees feel about this, any input from them, because they're the ones that are going to be affected. So I would be very interested in how our employees feel with this plan.
So after the presentation, we're going to have a public employee, the president of the
Oh, okay.
PEC, come up and
All
have
right.
some closing
I
remarks.
just feel, you know, it's their plan and their health insurance, so I would like to have some input from them before I make a choice for them.
Okay.
We would, of course, not purport to speak for them, and I think the chair of the PEC is here and will do an excellent job, I'm sure. What we will tell you is we met with them once. We shared this information. Your Public Employee Committee has an extraordinarily high level of sophistication and understanding of group health insurance issues, which is not typical of what a lot of the employee groups that we deal with. They've been managing this healthcare plan themselves for a long time, along with appropriate city officials, obviously, and doing an excellent job with it, frankly. And so the knowledge level is very high. That's why we're very hopeful and very optimistic that given these ideas that we've presented, that they will analyze them, find the ones that are appropriate, and hopefully embrace them. You have an extraordinary and a very good opportunity to both save money for the employees in the city
Right.
and improve benefits. That's very unusual. So you've got a wonderful opportunity here, and we're confident the PEC will partner with you in an enlightened way.
I would just like to, they're the ones that have affected, and I would love to hear from them, and, before I make a choice of anything. Thank
Okay.
you.
Couple more slides and then?
Yes.
Okay. One of the things we're going to try and parallel sort of the idea of an HMO model plan within our recommendation is we've had some success with other communities who have moved to a tiered program that's a little bit even more sophisticated than some of the GIC options are. It would take me a lot of time to kind of explain this in detail, but essentially, our recommendation is look at the HMO model of plan option, keep the PPO option in force. But moving to a tiered plan is a unique angle, if you will, because one of the things we're really not spending any time on is making sure that any recommendations we make leads to some long-term cost savings between the city and the member. This particular plan, after some education, allows members to seek care at high-quality, low-cost providers. What we did measure is almost half of the membership today is using a high-cost, low-quality providers, and we're trying to improve upon that. If a member actually seeks out through Blue Cross's information which providers are rated high, then there's no deductible, for instance, during the course of the year, and there's reduced copays. So we actually have an opportunity to put in front of any of your members a way to improve their benefits and lower their costs. So the metrics suggest a positive no matter which angle you look at. Of course, as Kevin mentioned, none of this comes without any significant amount of education, which obviously that's the biggest component of this. This is a high-level slide. There's obviously a lot of information on it. But the way this works is there's actually 3 columns of benefits under the HMO model. There's a plan if you use enhanced level care providers. There's a plan if you use standard providers and basic providers. Obviously, what we rely on is Blue Cross Blue Shield studying their claims data and their outcomes to put providers in certain of these categories. But we have some plans where members are able to look at community-based facilities and lower their costs, or go to providers that have lower copays. So obviously what that means to you is claims costs, which is the real expense of a self-insured plan, is reduced. And the more we can reduce those costs, the more we can pass on savings to the member and to the city. And then finally, I do believe this is, Maggie, this is underway, the Medicare bonding? Okay. So it looks like one of these programs is already in force. I mentioned early in the presentation how we've addressed improving benefits for roughly 29 to 30 retirees that don't have Medicare today. You do require them to have Medicare A and B if they're entitled to free Medicare. These folks never paid into the Social Security system properly. So we encourage the city to actually have these folks enroll in Medicare. They'll get a bill for about $550 on average for Medicare Part A and for Part B penalties and A penalties because they're late entrants. We had asked to work with the city, they may be doing it themselves, contact CMS, Medicare, Centers for Medicare Services, set up an electronic billing process to pay the bills for those retirees so they never see them. The retiree share of the Medic's premium and the Part B premium means they'll have actually less cost in monthly and out-of-pocket expenses for premium, and we'll see an improved benefit schedule as well. So one of the things we do know that is if you are in the Medicare system, the way our plan works today is literally no out-of-pocket expenses other than for prescription drugs. I think there's there's just prescription drug copays for mail order and for retail pharmacy. All other Medicare-approved services are covered in full with no cost sharing. That's not the way their plan works today. So these 29 retirees actually have the same out-of-pocket cost exposure as an active employee, younger and still earning income. So we've lowered their monthly premium and we've improved their benefits. And as we mentioned to you, at some point when your OPEB valuation is completed, there'll be a reduction in cost projections as well. Those were the 3, if you will, things that we kind of put together. As I did mention in the presentation, we had prepared a management letter that was sent to the city in August. It has obviously, I think about 12 pages worth of information and a more extensive PowerPoint that we had shared with the Public Employee Committee. And what we did is we extracted things out of it that we thought the council might have some interest in and trying to understand better.
Thank you. Does any councils have any questions? Council Ziegler?
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you to the presenters from NFP. So in your presentation, you mentioned that you looked at historical data, primarily from 2019. Did you study a trend in rate increases over an extended period of time, such as 5 years or so? I guess the crux of my question is whether or not you took into account possible rate increases in the next year or so.
Well, let me comment on this way. The threshold is what is their current rates for this roughly 1,000 life case compared to the Group Insurance Commission, and obviously our rates are higher here than the average rates charged within the GIC. For obviously much bigger population has better buying power. I didn't spend too much time looking historically at whether or not rates were set adequately or what rate increases were cumulatively. Our goal as advisors, and very simply, if you will, when we work with communities, is to try and benchmark no more than 2.5%, pretty much tied to your tax levy capability on an annual basis. And we try to make sure that we're benchmarking at that level or lower. Last year, we had quite a few groups that came in at levels that were equal or less than that. I can tell you that I have studied some of the utilization data over the last couple of months. There's not a significant uptick in claims cost. But I can tell you that pricing trends in the carrier industry are anywhere between 6 to 9%. It would be reasonable and expected and appropriate, based on how the plan's running, to probably look at something similar to that next year. I don't see anything to suggest anything more dramatic to that. I don't see anything to suggest that there should be a rate hold either. But again, we weren't really hired to kind of study exactly what our underwriting recommendations would be. A little bit too early to kind of set rates for fiscal year 21, but it would, as I said to you, it would be appropriate to look at pricing trend in that 6 to 9% range.
We can tell you one thing about the GIC, which is also a self-insured trust, a different kind a little bit than yours, but essentially it works the same way. The rate that's paid has to cover claims, administrative costs, reinsurance, and it also has to cover what's called IBNR, incurred but not reported. So on June 30th of each year, when the fiscal year is over, which is coincident with the plan year for the employee health insurance plan, there are a certain number of claims which have been incurred in that fiscal year just ending, but haven't yet been presented for payment. That's called IBNR. That's going to be presented for payment in the new fiscal year just beginning. When the trust posts its financial position on June 30th each year, both for reporting to the staff, to the council, the city, to the state, and for whatever other purposes you do that, OPEB calculations, bond presentations, et cetera. You are required to state what the balance of the trust is on June 30th of each year, and how much do you have of the IBNR margin funded. What we can tell you about the GIC is that the current rates that you're looking at are sufficient to both fund all those costs I mentioned and cover the claims reserve, the IBNR margin that must currently be maintained. Now that changes each June 30th, but we can tell you the GIC is fully funded at the current time. You would have to, as Ken said, our engagement didn't include looking at the adequacy of your trust fund from a financial point of view, so you'd have to look at that question and compare the adequacy of your trust fund as of a given June 30th to the GIC. And I don't know the answer to that question, but you could look at that.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, to the presenters. So at this stage, your report is now complete. What are the next steps?
At this stage, our report's complete.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilor Finicaro?
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you to the presenters. So on the, for me, some of the focus that I have is on the families who have a heavy use of medical insurance program, unfortunately. And on page, what was it, page 11 of the presentation, With the example of the Navigator versus the city's PPO, the out-of-pocket maximum with the Navigator goes up to $5,000 per individual and $10,000 per family. With the city, it's $3,000 and $6,000, though it's more out-of-pocket to begin with. Is the Navigator more of a typical example, a median example, high or low end? Do you see that being similar throughout GIC, or just some feedback on that?
So the 5 and 10 levels, if you will, under the Navigator are pretty typical for municipal benefits, if you will. The 3 and 6 is a positive for the employees. Qualified high deductible plans are as much as $6,500 and $13,000 out of pocket. Most of that subject to the deductible. So yes, that's a plan variable we would not have control of under the GIC. It's whatever they present to us, if you will, if you were with them, that you would end up receiving. So if there's a negative, if you will, it's pretty much a lack of control of plan design.
However, do put this in context. For someone to actually incur the out-of-pocket maximum is very difficult, because it takes a combination of very, very rare and exceptional circumstances, because somebody would have to both hit the deductibles and they'd have to experience a high number of other co-pays collectively in order to get up to that out-of-pocket maximum. While we can't say definitively standing here tonight, we would offer to you that that would be an extremely rare occurrence for any group of any type. You do have a requirement if you and the employees collectively decide that you want to look at this option, to bargain under the provisions of 2123 the impact of this. And part of that is you can establish a mitigation fund using 25% of the city's first year savings, which could be used to insulate employees from any untoward impact. Since the event of someone approaching those out-of-pocket is so rare, and since the savings is so huge, you could easily insulate any employee from any impact of out-of-pocket maximum for decades to come, easily.
Right.
I did want to comment that Town of Wakefield, for instance, GIC participant, has a mitigation fund for just that purpose.
Okay, excellent. That's a great idea. Now, with regards to, I believe it was page 15 on your presentation, I know you had spoken about the MedX 2 out-of-pocket maximum being none, but I just wanted to clarify that I understood it correctly. None versus zero kind of being a little bit different. Did you mean literally zero, that there is no required out-of-pocket
There's no
expenses?
accumulator from Blue Cross to measure the out-of-pocket cost, because the only expenses are co-pays for RX.
Okay, perfect. And my last question is, with regards, and you touched upon this topic earlier, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to answer a question I had from your original report, not your presentation. So with regards to long-term IBNR, I understand that reviewing that and OPEB liabilities wasn't in the scope of your formal commentary, but I did want to give you the opportunity to comment in this venue if you do have any generalized comments, because I'm interested in your perspective on that, because that is a concern for me. Not to put you on the spot.
No, that's okay. We're not consulting actuaries, so we don't measure lifespan, rate of return, healthcare use over 20. I think the GASB requires the funding to 2035. I can tell you that in a couple of other communities we've done this, there's been a significant reduction, millions of dollars, if you will, once we've kind of moved that older population. And we're talking about a known number of retirees. There could be some younger retirees that could actually move into that category as well. But I can't answer that from an OPEB perspective. I think it's whenever your new determination, your new ARC evaluation is being done, the consulting action would move that population into the lower cost plan and obviously give you a better result as a result.
Okay, thank you.
We had actually in our conversations with city officials earlier had kind of chatted about that, and we reported that we could not quantify the OPEB impact, but we were willing to say that it would be certainly in the millions favorably to the city, and we strongly urge that the city contact whoever your consulting actuary is to do an actual computation. The actuaries that work in this market space for cities and towns is a very small group. There's only 3 or 4. They're all the same folks that have done the OPEB calculations for other communities that have entered the GIC or adopted Section 21 to 23, done some local modifications and not entered the GIC. So they're very well familiar with the potential impact, and they could quantify it for you. And it's no part of what we've presented in terms of savings, but it is an additional savings that's very substantial.
Right. Thank you very much.
Any other questions for the presenters? Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
And we'll call up the president of the PEC, Scott Lever, just to give us some last minute, and if the council has any questions for him.
Good evening, thank you. My name is Scott Lever. I am the chair of the Methuen Insurance Coalition. I just would like to note that the coalition was never consulted or contacted about this report, which I guess I'm not offended by. I think an independent review is a good thing. However, 3 out of the 4 things we were already working on. There's so much involved in the city's health insurance. I could fire off several points of interest. However, I don't want to make this a workshop type session. I know you guys probably have other things to do, especially other things on the agenda. I'd just like to some of like Councilor Campione's comment, even Councilor Saber's question, I thought kind of got toward one of the things that I think is very understated, if stated at all here, is if Blue Cross Methuen, we'll say, and Blue Cross GIC, there'll be no change in usage, then where's the savings? I will tell you that we have 95% of our employees use within the same network. 95% of them, you're not going to see any change. So where are the savings? The savings is a cost shift. If you look at some of their slides, which the presentation they gave you tonight is not what they gave the coalition, and I think there's just a little more depth to present to you, however it is different. If you look at the GIC's current 2020, and this is all off of that interweb if you like, if you look at their current 2020 offerings, there's 5 plans that are more than the current Family City plan. And I just want to make a point that our current 62-38, 64-36 split is unheard of in the GIC. Of the cities and towns that have gone in the past 2 years, like 1 has gone in and 5 have come out, Drake being one of them. The reason stated to me that Drake came out was choice and control. If we go into the GIC, it's a mandatory 2-year commitment. And it was stated by NFP representatives that if there was an issue, they could just change their primary care physician and get the referral they wanted. Well, isn't that a PPO? Isn't that kind of circumventing the savings that we're trying to institute here? That's not the kind of education that we're doing. When we get to education, and I apologize if I'm bouncing around, but there's just some points that I wanted to, I kind of had this and probably another 2 milk crates full of information in my truck. But like I said, I don't want to, I've been working with this insurance for 5 years. There's a lot of things that are going on. I do know the last time the city tried to go to the GIC, well, actually, the first time it tried to go, there was opportunities for employees to come and speak. The old high school auditorium was booked, and immediately we moved to Knights of Columbus because so many people showed up, and there was a standing room only in the parking lot out there, to Councilor Campignon's comments. The reason we have a PPO is that's what the employees are desirous of. The control that we have, unlike with the GIC when they stripped everything down and gave one plan and the governor had to step in about 3-4 years ago, the control we have is we have an analysis that we do. Our current actuary is Borislow Insurance, Methuen resident and Methuen business. But they have a good 20, 30 years of experience with our claims history. We run about 90%, 97% of what our plan expectations are. So when we throw out that $18 million number, we don't generally hit that. Our health trust fund, we're $1.5 million over what we should be. Basically because of the cooperation that the coalition has with the city, in the sense that this year the city decided to, and not the current CAFO, for this renewal, the city decided to increase our stop-loss insurance. So increasing our stop-loss insurance sounds like great, we're getting more coverage, but what it actually did was it exposed the city to more liability. That was against the coalition's recommendation. It could save us $30,000, it could cost us $4 million. We have what's called a laser on one of our employees. That's at $450,000. The Blue Cross has said, this person costs a lot of money. You guys are going to pay that much before we even come into the picture. That's one. The rest of them hit that stop loss. We have anywhere between 4 and 7 employees that pretty much cover or cost about half of the insurance that we spend in dollars every year. So when we're told that the majority of the people will go here or there into this plan or that plan, it's skeptical, and I caution you on just accepting things at face value. Some of these numbers, I mean, this report, when it was first presented to us, your report went into a little bit more depth, but there's so many other things that are involved in the insurance and the way it's administered, but this doesn't really educate you enough. We do have meetings. If you'd like, you can come. I'll email you. You can call me. I can provide you with my information off camera. But what I want to say is that as Drake had stated, one of the biggest issues was control. So we do an analysis, and 2 years ago, osteo, or we'll just say the bone stuff, became an issue. Hips, shoulders, backs. We instituted a wellness program that addressed those issues. We had high usage 5 years ago in emergency room visits. We had a $50 copay. I raised it to $150 to educate people that people were going to the emergency room for a bellyache. Yeah, that's a walk-in clinic, not the emergency room, but because their doctor wasn't open, that was pretty much where they would go. That's how we've done education. I've done videos. I don't know if any of you have seen them. We've been out on YouTube doing videos for the Canna RX program. Just a real quick blip on the Canna RX program in case some members are watching. If you have a name brand drug that is on their list, you sign up with them. They'll get it from an approved country, similar to our level of FDA approval, if not better. They'll send it to us. The member pays no copay, and the city pays a much reduced cost for a name brand drug. That's one of the things we actually annualized a $300,000 savings off of that. We haven't quite reached that goal yet, but we're working towards that. You would lose that in the GIC. One of the things, which I think goes back to my first statement, if Blue Cross Methuen and Blue Cross GIC are the same, the doctors are going to charge the same, and the people are going to refer to the same people, where's the savings? And this slide here, your planned benefits slide, I don't know what number their slide was. It's not the same as mine. I just want you to understand that your deductibles reset quarterly. So your $1,500 deductible is $6,000. Pretty good savings. It's $6,000 out of the pocket of the employee. As far as the Medicare and the MedEx shifting those people over, we've been doing that for the 5 years that I've been here. We currently have 25 members and 4 spouses that we're reaching out to contact. The benefit to that is, and we've done this over the past few years, the benefit to that, as we've all mentioned OPEB, and I'm hoping you all know what OPEB is. I just kind of have an idea that it affects our bond rating. If we can get them to join, which if we pay their penalty, I really don't see any reason they would. We're looking at possibly an $800,000 savings. You can't guarantee that. And again, they did say that this is generalized. And honestly, none of these numbers have been confirmed or actually verified because you really can't. Like I said, there are 5 plans in the GIC that are more than our plan. We would have no control over that. And Councilor Campagnon mentioned about the employee. If you don't like your plan, yeah, you can change it next year. I mean, if you can put off your medical needs till next year, then maybe you can, work that out. I'm very dubious of the GIC. This would be the 4th time that the GIC has been brought up for the city. And the last time that we talked about this was with Tom Kelly. It ended up costing the city $1.1 million more than where we are now. And that was with, I don't think any of the plans, and I don't want to speculate because I don't want to throw out numbers, but I don't think any of the plans were more expensive than ours, or I'm sorry, less expensive than ours. I do have some numbers, and I promised myself I wouldn't give you numbers because if I tell you $10 today and it's $12 tomorrow, you're going to say, well, you lied. Well, I didn't. Based on an estimated cost with the 29 people, we're looking at a potential of $200,000 in savings. But what the benefit is the employee, the retired employee gets a much better plan. And the reason that works better for us is they're now under the Fed's bucket, and we refer to our costs as buckets. What bucket does what cost come out of? They go up into the Fed's bucket, and that reduces our liability. We've annualized that currently with these 25 plus 4 as about $200,000 worth of savings. I don't want to overstate that needs to be, or understate that needs to be done. We're doing it. We've been doing it. Interestingly enough, we actually had Borislow look at our current plan and say, give me an HMO that looks just like one of the GIC HMOs or a current GIC level HMO. We came up with a 5% increase to the city. There's a lot of moving parts here. I'm available. Like I said, I'll give you my information. We would love the savings. But a lot of this is based on us going in at 6238. Nobody's in there at 6238. This would be a change in working conditions we would negotiate. Back when Tom Kelly and I were working on this, 1% shift was $111,000. It ended up working out, and that was, I want to say 2014. Costs have gone up. They're probably a little bit more, but the end result would end up costing the city more. That's just why we stayed for the past few years. Again, I want to just give you a word of caution on reading this at face value and let you know that we do have an engaged coalition. We're working hard. We're addressing the issues specifically for Methuen. And so far, our IBNR has never exceeded our health trust fund. We're $1.5 million over. We're very healthy.
Thank you. Does any councilors have any questions for Mr. Leva? Councilor Vidla?
Thank you very much. I do understand that you may not have the answer to this question. I was just curious, does the coalition have an understanding of their membership at this point for how many members have dependents that may be out of state? In looking at the plans, there's regional plans and then there's national plans. So I was just wondering if you have that information or if it's something that the coalition has looked at in the past.
So I don't have the specific information, but I will tell you that for our older population, and I won't, I'm getting close, so I won't say specifically, we're reaching a 50-50 of the younger versus the older. And our older population, very difficult to get in touch with because they're snowbirds, which tells me, with the experience I have with our plan, that they're going to want that out-of-network plan, which is about $300 more a month. In looking at transferring them to Medicare, that Medicare transfer thing that we were paying their penalty, it came to light that in the last, so the elderly, so we'll say 60 and above. For every dollar below, medical dollar below spent of $1, the 65 and above or 60 and above spends about $1.50. They're the ones that are going to be the bigger spends. And you usually spend a significant amount of health care cost in the last 3 to 5 years of your life, naturally. That would probably be an out-of-network, depending on where those problems would happen. However, as I say that, I'm also saying that 95% of our use is within network. So, again, I'm just being cautious. I don't really want to be quoted as far as specifics, but I do want to just throw out a caution flag. But more than 50% shortly of our population will be the older portion.
Okay, thank you. And do you, and I understand that you may not have this. I was also thinking of the dependent population that might be college age, so they're not necessarily in the state. So I would understand that they would be in a broader network,
Yeah, they would also be they could be out of network, they could very well be within network.
Okay.
Again, as was stated, it's very hard to say this is what it is going to be. We were compared to Haverhill. Well, Haverhill kind of, this is what everybody else does, yet at the same time they were saying that we're unique, we're anomalous. I don't know, maybe that's an indication that we may be anomalous in that as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Any other questions, Council Ziegler?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to our presenter, thank you so much for being here and for giving us a little bit of insight as to the process. One of the things you said concerned me in that you said that the coalition wasn't truly consulted on this report. At what point were you or members of the coalition reached out to, and what was the nature of that conversation?
So I had a meeting in November of 2016 or 17, 2017, I believe, with Mr. Fahey, the then interim financial person, Cheryl. And that's when I was told that next year, meaning in January, there would be an analysis of the health insurance, at which time I asked to be involved in it, but was never consulted on it. The first time I saw the report, I believe was in September, was when I was so almost a year and a half later. No one ever came to us, no one ever asked us, you know, why do we do it this way, what happens, what components make up our, they were basically going on raw data from Blue Cross. And and this is where not to get too deep into, and I apologize, but, so we have Blue Cross, we have stop loss, we have a laser, we have an HRA, all that kind of interact and influence each other. And this is a very, not to offend, but it's a very like a top level, just skim of the top as to down, which I would understand, but it's not really, which is why I'm just trying to give you a word of caution. This is all based on data from, I believe, Blue Cross and the city accountant, not currently the CAFO, but the whoever pays the bills downstairs.
Thank you.
Anybody else for Mr. Weaver? Thank you. Thank you, Scott. And
Thank you for your time.
If you don't mind, if you want to send our council clerk all your information, and then any of the sitting councilors can get in touch with you if they want to.
Absolutely. Thank
Okay,
you very much. Thank you
for
again.
your time.
Thank you.
Do we have any public participation, if somebody can check? Okay, no public participation. Under public service grants, we have none. Licenses, we have none. Under contracts, we have C-20-16 for Daigle Electrical Construction Corporation from 68 Industrial Way, Wilmington, Mass. for traffic light repair and maintenance services in the amount of $45,000 for 20 months, plus 2 one-year extensions. Extension only if the funds are budgeted for each fiscal year, otherwise contract voided. I need a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Motion to approve from Council Saber.
Second for discussion.
Thank you. Second from Councilor Ziegler for discussion. And if we want, we'll bring the interim community development director, Lorenza, up, and
Public Works.
DPW, what did I say?
Community development.
Okay.
We just got a change in venue.
Councilor Ziegler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Director Lorenza. One of the things I noticed on the compilations of accounts that would satisfy this contract was that there was $15,000 being derived from the snow and ice budget. Can you just go into that a little bit
Sure.
more?
When it gets slippery and icy, we have a lot of accidents, so they are reimbursable to the city, but I just needed to have an account for it to come out of. And this is all because of icy conditions. These are knockdowns and repairs. We eventually get it back, we have to pay for it, then 60, 90 days it gets reimbursed and goes back in that account.
And through you, Madam Chair, so how does that process work? And I ask these questions because I get very concerned if we're taking money out of that account, because that account is under budgeted every year to begin with. So when you say that we get reimbursed for that, how
So it's an ice storm, we have accidents, a traffic signal comes down. We need to pay for that service to get it up and running. And when the insurance gets reimbursed, or I should say there's an insurance recovery, it goes back into that account.
And this is a standard practice?
To make up the contract for $45,000, yes.
Okay. And I ask that just because this is the first time I'm seeing something like this come before us. And it does make me a little uncomfortable, so I just wanted to ask a question about that. Thank you.
Any other questions? Councilor McCarty.
Yes, thank you. Through you to Daryl, is this a service that we usually do in-house?
This is something we take care of mostly in-house, but this is for like specialty work, something that they need assistance with, and that's when we call them for service.
Okay, so when they need assistance now, what's the protocol?
We have electric light that we were using, and the contract ran out. So this is a new contract.
So this is a whole new company. Is there a reason why this switch was made?
Lowest bidder, qualified bidder.
Do you know how much the bid was lowered by?
No, I don't have that in front of me.
Is there a reason why you don't have that in front of you?
It wasn't in the packet, so I just went with the purchasing agent.
Okay, and as I scroll through this, the compensation portion of the contract lists 200 hours of straight time, 100 hours of overtime, and then there's a 10% markup on parts. Now, towards the end of...
Yeah, go ahead.
Towards the end of the contract, the aggregate of those three items came out to roughly $26,000.
Correct.
Is there a reason why the contract's for 45?
It's for 20 months. That's 26,000 for 1 year. So if you average it out, it's just under 45,000 for the 20 months.
Okay, and then on the front page, it says that there's $45,000, I would assume, being drawn out of this fiscal year?
Possibly,
What do you mean possibly?
if, depending what kind of what the accidents are in nature. You know, it's a service contract on call as needed.
So you just said that it's $26,762
Possibly per year.
annually,
Possibly.
annually
Yeah.
for 20 months. So I understand if that was the case, then 26 and 26 minus the 4 months that have already passed, you get, 44,000 and some change. But yet there's 45,000 being drawn out for this fiscal year.
To have the contract up in front of you, I had to come up with $45,000 for the 20 months, so. Is that what I'm looking
Great.
for?
Can I just
Yeah.
jump in
Yes,
for
of
1
course.
second? So because it's a service contract, the max it's going to go up to is 45,000. It doesn't mean that we're going to spend 45,000. So for example, the snow and ice line, there's 15,000 there because we historically have had, correct me if I'm wrong, but accidents during those storms that take these down, and we need people to come out immediately to fix them. That's where that would come out of. It doesn't mean we're going to spend 15,000 guaranteed out of that line. It means I'm making him put $15,000 aside because we may need to use that for that purpose. So it's up to 45,000. It's not a guaranteed 45,000, if that makes sense.
So if that's the logic, is it going to be up to 45,000 again next year? This potentially could be a $90,000 contract?
That's my understanding.
Historically, we haven't gone that far. 45 is what we're looking for the 20 months.
And Maggie, while you're up here, do you happen to know how much this bid beat the previous company by?
I don't have that in front of me right now. I apologize.
Okay, and while you're up here, is there a reason why a contract under 50,000 is in front of us in the first place?
Because it's a 2-year contract, so we're committing to more than 1 year, and so the 2-year contract would be potentially up to 90,000, so we thought it was appropriate to bring in front of council.
Okay, well, with all the uncertainties here, I don't feel comfortable passing this tonight. I would be making a motion to table at the end of the discussion.
Okay, any other discussion here? Councilor Finicaro?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you. Almost exactly a year ago, I had reached out to you about some lights in different areas that were out due to car accidents, and including some on Broadway near the Nevins home. On one section, I believe it's page 1 of this, it mentions service and supply, but obviously $45,000 isn't that much given that a lot of these lights, both the traffic and any other light repairs, or if you need a new one, it's like several $100,000. So I'm assuming that won't go towards that, but is this something that could be used to repair some of those requests? And if not, is there a separate fund for that?
So your streetlights you're talking about is a different contract. That's a streetlight contract. This is traffic signals, crosswalks, things of that nature.
Right, but there's still the crosswalk traffic lights that are broken that we have. So you would be able to immediately, up to $45,000 worth, repair any of those issues?
If possible, yes.
Okay. And let me see. Questions I had. If you go to page 6, it says the vendor shall be responsible for obtaining all necessary permits. Permit fees will be waived by the city of Methuen. Is that typical for these kinds of contracts? I just haven't seen that expressly said, and
That's standard. They still pull the permit, but there are no fees involved with that.
Okay, thank you. And on the same page 6, it says, when needed, the city shall be responsible for ordering police detail. The cost of the police detail shall be the city's responsibility for payment. Can you let me know who determines when the police detail is needed?
Depending where it is, if they're in the middle of the intersection, we're stopping traffic, the lights are out, and they're working on it, there's a police detail to keep the traffic moving.
So that would be your department requested or
Correct,
the mayor's
correct,
department?
yes.
Okay. And as well on page 7, this is an inventory of City of Methuen traffic lights. For any traffic lights that were, had an issue and are damaged and are not currently functioning, or potential pending traffic lights, and this might be a question more for the city solicitor. Given that this is actually part of the contract, Mr. Solicitor, on page 7, they only have a requirement to repair this actual list? Because I know that there are some in question currently. Would that not apply?
Through you, Madam Chair, it would depend on how this was bid, Counselor, and I don't handle that. It's handled through the purchasing department. So if it was bid to, if this was the list that's part of the contract and the contract understood that these would be the only traffic lights that it would service, should there be a problem, then yes, the answer would be yes. If this is something that, where there may be common locations, then, and that's what they understand, or that it's an open-ended, that would be up to what the bidding process was. But I would say that since these are listed here, and maybe Mr. Lorenzo has a better answer based upon experience of where they've had more frequent problems due to the volume of traffic.
If there's an issue and it's an emergency and the city directs them to do it, it will get taken care of. Okay.
And my last question is with regards to, I know that we've had a variety of issues with traffic lights that are state-maintained traffic lights in the city. Are we allowed at any point to use any of these funds in an emergency situation where the state is not doing their due diligence and actually repairing our own traffic lights, or is that something that this would not be under the scope of what was put forward that would be allowed?
This is not under that scope of work. The state has its own emergency contracts in place.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions on this contract, Council Saber?
So I'm just curious here. We have the acting director of the DPW, we have the CAFO, and the chief of staff. Can someone tell me who would go through the process of opening these bids? Who would have gone through the bidding process? Who would have opened the bids and selected the winner?
Purchasing agent.
Purchasing agent.
Yes.
And
So the scope of work was put together from previous contracts and tailored to what we're looking for and added in, and she put it out to bid.
so, maybe through the chief of staff, would anyone have been present with the purchasing director when these, I'm just curious in general, how this is done. Would someone have been there to witness the opening of these bids and the review?
Well, can I ask a question? Are they replacing Covino Electric? Because that's who used to do all the work, Covino, whatever.
No, they were streetlights.
Streetlights.
So those were streetlights? And so nobody knows who the prior person
Oh, it
was?
was electric light service.
Nobody knows who the prior person, nobody from the city knows who was the prior person who fixed our...
Electric Light is the name of the company.
Oh,
that
Electric
Yes,
Light.
Electric Light is the contractor. And that contract ran out.
So my question again is, yeah, who would have reviewed these bids?
So when we have a bid opening, we have a public bid opening, so anybody who's placing a bid is welcome to come while it's being opened. It's usually down in the conference room downstairs. Our purchasing director is the one who runs that. She opens all of them publicly, makes note of all of the results publicly, and then that's what the decision's made off of after that.
Okay, was there anyone else from the city involved in that? Or would it just be the purchasing director and anyone else from the public who shows up? Is that the case?
That the department head or someone from the department usually tends to be there.
Yeah, there's witnesses.
Yeah.
It's like they have a sign-in sheet.
So you weren't there?
I wasn't there, no, not for the bid opening.
I guess, this is one of those situations where we wonder why the process, this council struggles with these decisions. I don't see any reason why it was a public bid, why the purchasing director would not have just given us a summary. We're changing vendors here. Here's the bidding process, here's where they came in. You know, again, this council's been together for 2 years, and we run into these things on a regular basis. This would have avoided a lot of question.
We'd be happy to give you that information going forward.
I'll second the table.
Yeah, me too.
Well, I think we have one more. Counselor Saber, you all set?
Yes, thank you.
Counselor Bidler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I only have a couple of questions. I understand that we don't have the other bidders' information. It has been requested. I'm actually interested in, when did the electric light contract expire?
A few months back.
A few months back?
Yeah.
Okay.
We've been working on the specifications.
Okay, thank you. And in the interim, since their contract expired, and this new contract, which I know has a start date of November 1st, how were we addressing any traffic light concerns that might have been represented?
In-house, and we've used them on an emergency basis a couple times also, electric light.
Thank you. And the list on page 7, as far as the locations, have there been any amendments or changes to the locations that have been listed from the past contract?
This is coming out of the city GIS locations of what we have, that we have documented, and this is accurate.
So this is based off of the GIS
Correct, out of
information?
engineering, yes.
Is that the Merrimack Valley Planning Commission's GIS information that they hold for Methuen?
Correct.
So it is possibly a different list than what's in the electric light contract that expired?
Possibly.
Okay.
This was
And-
updated.
Okay, so it might have been outdated. How long was the last contract for?
I don't have that in front of me.
And I note that Pelham Street at Danton Drive and Aegean Drive is listed. There was a major construction project that was listed there. As of last year, it sounded like there was still, it was still under the contract
Warranty.
project. And I'm curious as far as, was that released? Is it now back to the city, since it's on this project list?
If it's on this, it was updated.
Okay, that was a concern that Councilor Kazanjian had addressed on multiple locations, since the lights have malfunctioned, and that actually was under the construction proposal. And then I think my last question, pending response, would be, how was the 20 months determined?
To get it in line with the following fiscal year.
Okay.
Okay.
So I did look at, it looks like it ends on June 30th, if we go with the
Following
20-month and no extensions. So my only other follow-up would be, on other contracts or intents to award that we've seen, there was actually the phrase like maximum listed under the amount versus just the amount, and I understand that we are saying that it's up to the 45,000 potentially. I'm just wondering, like, if there was rationale why some of them list maximum and then this one just lists 45. And I noted on page 1 under item 4 compensation, it lists total proposed price. It doesn't list total maximum proposed price. And I know this is just terminology, but it seems like wording seems to matter, that we've learned.
Okay.
So should it have the word maximum? And I guess I'm just directing this to either through the chair to the city solicitor, or through the chair to the acting director, or even to the CAFO.
Should it contain the word maximum as the cap? Is that what you're asking, Counselor?
Yes, we heard tonight that it would not necessarily be 45,000.
Bless you.
Bless you, sir. We heard tonight that it's not actually going to be 45, but it could be 45. And on some of the other intent to awards that we've seen, we've actually seen it phrased as maximum. So
That could be put in there, and that would give, I guess, the indication that would be the cap. But since the contract itself states only that at 45, that in and of itself caps it at that amount. Again, all these contracts are all subject to funding, and I believe there's even a provision in this contract that states that. So if in the city's judgment there is no funding available, there is no legal action to be taken against the city because of that.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Saber?
Yeah, I had one more question. Darrell, I spoke with you about Pleasant Valley, the synchronization of those lights, but
Yep.
you said they're state lights, correct?
Correct.
So why is that on this list? Is this the list that
Pleasant Valley coming, are you talking, which one, at the intersection?
Pleasant Valley Street, where Hafner's is, where the Loop is?
Yep.
Mann's?
We had a lot of complaints of Pleasant Valley and Jackson Street, which is a state-owned.
It starts from there all the way down.
So
Are they all on this?
I don't believe so. I believe we have a couple there. There's a couple of ours there.
Okay, all right.
Okay.
Okay, I'll speak to you about that, all right,
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah.
Counselor Campagnon?
Yes, through you, Madam Chair, to Gerald. On the list here, we have Pleasant Valley School and Pleasant Valley Street twice. Now, there's no set of lights out in front of the PV.
I think the crosswalks, there was crosswalks there on the signals. Is that what you're talking about? The Pleasant Valley?
Out in front of the Pleasant Valley School, there's no lights there. Go up to Merrimack Street, there's the lights.
Yeah, there might be push buttons there for an old crosswalk that's still on. That might still be there.
Oh, all right, okay. So people don't vision.
There may not be traffic. They might be, they
There's
signals.
no
They're
traffic
signals.
lights
They're
there.
signals.
Right, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Counselor Kazianjin?
Darrell, do you know, do we charge back the schools for the maintenance portion of this contract? Because a lot of it has to do with the schools.
There's some traffic signals in there, in the budget, I believe, from the school, for school signals. There's a small amount in there for maintenance.
That we do charge them back.
I'm not quite sure how it's done, but it's in my budget for school zone safety.
Yeah.
With the CAFO note, do we charge them back? Is that in part of the agreement?
Let's say that right in the microphone.
That is part of that calculation.
That is part of the
Part of the
calculation
calculation in the,
Chargebacks.
for the chargebacks?
Yes.
Thank you.
for the chargebacks. Any other discussion
Good
on
God.
this?
Motion to table?
I have a
Second.
motion from Counselor McCarty, second from Counselor Ziegler to table. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Thank you. Appointment to fiscal analyst position of the city council. I need a motion to approve.
So moved.
I have a motion from Counselor Campagnon,
Second.
second from Counselor Vidla. Discussion. I'm going to turn it over to Counselor Vidla to give us a brief update of where we stand.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Last Thursday, November 14th, we held a open interview in public session. We interviewed a candidate by the name of Kelly Hebert, and we had a good discussion. All counselors were able to ask questions. So tonight, we need to enter into discussion and deliberation regarding the candidate and the will of the council. As a reminder, prior in October, the committee came back to the full council to ask them what their will was, and the determination by a majority of the council was to move forward on pursuing the candidates, and that led us to the interview that we had last week. So we want to open it up to discussion and deliberation regarding the candidate from last Thursday.
So I will open it up. Any questions? I'll start with Counselor Kazianjin, then come right down the line. Counselor Kazianjin.
No, I thank you for all the hard work you put into it, but we're coming now down to the end. 5 of us aren't going to be here in a month or so, and that's it, and there's new people coming on, and plus a new mayor, I would suggest we hold it and let the new council and the new mayor make the decision, whether or not whatever they're gonna do with it.
Councilor Ziegler?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I'm definitely torn on this. While there's definitely some weight to what Councilor Kazanjian had mentioned, I feel that it would be good for the new council to have some support as that would be provided through this position. But one of the questions that I posed during the interview was with regards to the time commitment that the candidate would adhere to, if you will, in this position. And the response leads me to believe that there is no certain time by which the candidate would assume the role. So it could be 120 days, it could be 6 months, it could be 1 year, and then all of the hard work that was put in to finding a qualified candidate would start back up again. So I'm not quite sure. I'd love to hear from the rest of the council. What do we do? Do we just then table this and take this back up, or do we just say that we want to take that chance and potentially hire on a candidate that may only stay for 120 days or 6 months and just kind of deal with that uncertainty? Thank you.
Councilor Finicchio?
Thank you, Madam Chair. In thinking about this topic, I did reach out to as many of the incoming counselors as I was able to reach, and the opinions generally was that they did want to hit the ground running, and that was what I heard from them. I do share some of the concerns of Councilor Kazanjian, but my concern is that it's also this was something that we were supposed to fill much earlier to begin with, and that we were hoping that it would be filled much earlier. I do have a concern that if we do not have somebody in this position between now through the end of the year and maybe go back out and post, we would have to go through the whole process again. I'm not sure what the timeline on that would be, but in the meantime, we would have a council that majority of whom are new or second-term counselors for the most part, and we'd have no fiscal analyst. So I really truly feel like the city council needs to have representation, financial representation that is separate from the mayor in order to preserve our two bodies and their own strength. So, for me, I would be interested. The actual motion was to move forward with the appointment, not on a specific name. So one question that I have through you, Madam Chair, to the city solicitor, do we need to amend the appointment to state the person's specific name?
Through you, Madam Chair, no. Excuse me, Counselor. If it was the council's intent to make the appointment tonight, it's my understanding that it's only down to one candidate, then you can make that appointment.
Okay, so through you, Madam Chair, so you're saying that this specific vote would only be whether or not to appoint, not to appoint the specific individual?
No, you may appoint the specific individual.
Okay, so, but we wouldn't be mentioning their name doesn't need to be in the motion?
That's correct. I think I was asked, well, perhaps, I'm not sure who asked me a week or so ago, but it was regarding, may have been Councilor Ziegler, that, can we do this? They're down. Once the candidates are down to the finalists, I know that there are concerns about perhaps their current employment and would it be harmed if they were found or thought to be looking for another job. Once they're down to the final, you basically by law have to announce who they are, and they, I'm sure, understand that. Once you've asked us for queries and all that, or you've said you're now a finalist, then they're in the running, and it has to be public knowledge.
Okay, so then, through you, Madam Chair, would it then be appropriate for me to at least mention for the record the individual that we're discussing for a vote? Would that be?
Chair did, yeah.
Okay, all
Yeah,
right.
she did. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. And my second question is relative to, can we put a qualifier? I know that we're not voting on the specific contract, but in this vote, could we make an amendment to put a qualifier saying not to exceed a certain term of a contract? I know the contract is a separate vote, but for me, I'm in favor of moving forward if we have a maximum of a one-year contract. So is that possible, appropriate, and if so, what would that amendment look like?
Through you, Madam Chair, if that's, unless there were some advertisement that said the term of appointment will be for X amount, then, and I don't believe there was in any advertisement, if you wanted to make a probationary period, or you wanted to make it a year or 6 months, and reevaluate, or allow the new council to weigh in, certainly you have the authority to do that tonight in your vote.
Okay, thank you, because it did sound in our interview process the other day, it did sound like she was willing to do that, and she was flexible on timing, so that might be able to be a compromise to satisfy both sides of all the concerns, so we have somebody for now, but could give the next council the opportunity to work with this person and decide if they want to continue their contract instead of being stuck for 3 years. My perspective during that interview process was that they answered some very difficult questions well. Some of the questions that were asked by myself were if they had conflicts of interest in the city. The answer was no, as well as how they would approach difficult situations. And, I was impressed with that and their experience. So long as we can qualify this with an amendment, and I don't want to make the amendment yet to give the rest of my fellow councilors the opportunity to speak, then I would be in favor of moving forward.
And again, through you, Madam Chair, it would merely become a condition of employment.
Right.
Thank you.
Councilor Campagnon.
Yes, I agree. I know it took a while for this interview and job-seeking individual, and excellent candidate. And I feel torn too because of the new council coming in. I wish there was something that we could put into play that by appointing this person, the new council would have some input to it. Because the person's going to be leaving a job to take another one, and I mean, it's their livelihood. So to put somebody on the hot seat, with all the up in the air questions, I would have loved to have some input from the newly elected officials. So, I mean, every individual needs an income, so, it's kind of hard for someone to take a job and then say, well, we don't know how long you're going to be here. So, that's my feeling. Maybe we could come to an agreement with the new council-elect and hope for the best. Thank you.
Councilor McCartney, I'm going around, so.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you to the rest of the council. I believe we took on this endeavor a long time ago. We spent time, resources on this. We're down to one candidate. I think she's overqualified for the position, quite frankly. It sounds like I think we're very fortunate to have the 15-hour-a-week thing that we laid out. I hope that there's room to have that expand based on our conversations. I think we see this thing through. We don't simply stop working our last 3 months of the job and let the papers pile up and then hand them off to somebody coming in who should be focused on, getting into the flow of business and procedure. And I think that, we see this thing through. We did have the Collins Center on the task. I know that they cost money. We had, 3 members of this council put in a lot of time. That committee, 4 members of this, sorry. And so I'm happy with the candidate we have left. If she feels as though we're gonna wait 2 months to give her an answer, she might pull out, and then we would be stuck starting the process all over again. I believe you guys interviewed 12 people. We came down to 1. You did a great job. And so I am ready to make the appointment tonight, and I don't think we should get into the habit of just stop working on the last 90 days. Thank you.
Council Faber?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. One thing is that this is not a decision of the current mayor or the future mayor. This is an employee of the council. So I don't think we need any input from there. We certainly do not need that input. My only concern, similar to what Councilor Ziegler had said, is the fact that this candidate indicated that she couldn't really give us a commitment, long-term or not. But the more I thought about that, that's not necessarily a bad thing in this case, because this is a brand-new position. We're still trying to figure out exactly what this person's gonna do. So if this person came in here and helped to develop that job and left in 3 months or 6 months, we'll have a much better idea of what we're looking for with the new person. So I'm not afraid to make that hire. I think she's gonna be excellent. And I agree, we've been working on this for a long time. We need to get this position filled, so I'm gonna support it. Thank you.
And I'm going to let Councilor Vidler close it up, but I do want to say that I had a concern when Councilor Ziegler did ask the question about her long-term employment, and some of that could have arose from the length of time that it took us to bring her here. I mean, maybe she was looking for July, August, and then would have looked into at least 6 months. However, I couldn't agree with both of you more, the two last speakers, because I think getting somebody in, starting the job, and then if she does find something else and she may want to stay to train the next person, at least we'll have the footprint there, because the council, as you said, and I couldn't agree with you more, Councilor McCarty, we still have some business to do in the city till December 31st, and whatever information we can pass over to the new council, I think would be very helpful to keep the city moving forward, continuation of the government. So I will support that, although I was very concerned with the fact that she didn't know, and if this was a stepping stone, but when you do the fiscal year 2021 budget, maybe she likes it, and you can extend that to a longer, more than a part-time position if the next council wills that. So again, I think at least establishing the position was very important. So, Councilor Vidler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The last thing I would just like to mention is that the Collins Center did do education, background, and reference checks, and they all came back glowing. This is a candidate that I would agree is overqualified, and she is interested in helping us set the stage as we go forward. Ideally, if we could have gotten her in several months ago, that would have been wonderful, because we would have been able to establish the role. We were not able to, but we have a solid candidate in front of us. She participated, she stayed longer than what was expected during the interview process. She has shown that she's actually engaged. She has actually watched our videos, watched our city council meetings, and while I can understand the desire to have the next council participate, we still do have time left in this year, and I would say that our council meeting last Thursday was publicized. Our council meeting was open to the public, and we actually had no one participate in the meeting. And I think we now have the task of making this decision, and we need to make this decision not only for the council, but also for the residents. I do think it is the right decision for us to move forward with this candidate. And I think I'll just stop there.
Okay, great. I do have an inquiry to the city solicitor, just on a reference that Councilor Finicaro had made. So when we take the vote on this appointment, we are just making the motion to appoint the fiscal analyst position and to state the name of the person, correct?
That is correct, Madam Chair.
Now, the only thing is, rather than start amending the appointment itself, because, I just want to say who the person is and that we're appointing, could we just add the caveat pending a signed contract approved by the city council? That way, we're putting in exactly what we expect from her before we actually, give her the appointment itself. She'd have to sign the contract, correct?
Certainly, you can do that. You can make it a conditional appointment upon the execution of a contract between the parties.
That way, the position would be hers pending the agreement of the contract. Almost
Correct.
like we do with yours, and I believe, who else did we do that with?
Interim.
Oh, the interim city
auditor.
auditor,
Yes, yeah.
correct. That's where that, so I think that, I just don't want to convolute the appointment, so,
Certainly.
okay, so I don't know if that helps with your,
Madam Chair, my only concern would be that, I don't know if anybody else feels the same way, but my confidence in moving forward, regardless of the fact that we are very close to the next city council, is with assuring with this vote that we don't have a contract to exceed 1 year. And I know that during her interview process, she stated publicly that that was something that she was fine with and even suggested it herself. So my suggestion would be to get as many in favor votes as possible tonight, that the only amendment to what you stated, that we say that that contract not to exceed 1 year.
would that be the appointment anyway, to Council Carroll's question? Would that be when we renew the contracts anyway, which would be the odd number of years, so her contract would only be until 2023, correct?
Madam Chair, technically, if that's what you wanted to do, where it is
Or 2021,
not
I'm
currently
sorry.
part of the charter, then that's really a provision that's in the charter for the council employees. So you certainly could follow the same.
It's coming up on the agenda tonight, though, to put that,
To do the- yes.
home rule petition, so.
Yes, for the assistant city attorney.
And the fiscal analyst.
Okay,
So,
that's right, through Mr. Cronin's proposal. So that's fine. I think that it shall, perhaps if you just add the wording into the motion, that it shall not exceed the period of 1 year.
Shall not
Or
exceed
shall
1
be for a period of 1 year.
From
And
what
you can
date?
even, well, you can even say either the expiration or from the point of hiring. It's up to you. Whatever you vote tonight is the law, becomes the law, so, and that becomes the
Through you, Madam
guideline and the
Chair.
rule.
the reason why I said not to exceed 1 year instead of for 1 year is that she herself mentioned even potential shorter terms and seemed unclear with stating how long she could actually be here. So I was thinking that then as a second step, when we have to approve her contract, we could further ask her what she was comfortable with, up to 1 year, and then move forward with whatever that minimum that we had in common was. But for tonight, to just state that it wouldn't be more than 1 year.
Whatever the will of the council is, you certainly have the authority to vote that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we do, if you wanted to make an amendment, because we do have the appointment to the fiscal analyst position of the city council. If somebody wants to add an amendment other than Council Finicaro saying pending a signed contract approved by the council, or if you don't want it, that's the pleasure of the council. So whoever wants to make, I can't make amendments.
Would you like me to make the amendment?
Sure.
I'd like to make a motion for the amendment to add with a contract not to exceed 1 year.
Second.
So I have a motion from Council Finicaro, second from Council Campagnon, to say that the contract will not exceed 1 year. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That's a unanimous vote. Is that the only contract? You don't want to write anything about pending a signed contract, or we can leave that out? Okay. So now we need a motion on the main motion as amended.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion from Councilor Campagnon, second from Councilor Ziegler, for the main motion as amended. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? No.
7 years, 1 no.
7 yes, 1 no. The motion passes. The next item on the agenda is a vote tax classification factor. I need a motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
I have a motion from Council Campagnon, second from Council Ziegler. Any discussion on this item? Hearing and seeing none. Okay, so what we'll do is 3 separate motions. Let me just see that one. Oh, I get one.
I have a question.
I have it. Okay, so the first motion is for the resident,
I've got a question. Now, we're voting on the individual pieces. We're not voting on the actual cost.
we're gonna
What
do
this
the,
is gonna cost the homeowners.
so we'll take the first motion, and then I believe somebody will get up and tell us exactly what the tax rate will be.
Rate is?
And then we can take a motion up or down, then we'll do that same with 2 and 3. Am I correct on that? Yeah, tax rate. The tax rate is number 3, okay? So I need a motion for the residential exemption of up to 35% of the average assessed valuation of residential property.
Can we have Michelle come up to remind us of?
Michelle, do you want to just come up? That way, the city assessor, that way if the councils have any questions.
Because there's a yes and a no vote, and
Right.
one of them is opposite to what you think you would.
Right. Did you want to, I know usually every year we're guided as to the yay or the nay on this vote.
Historically, it's always been a nay. You've never voted on a residential exemption in the past. Typically, the recommendation would be that you wouldn't, only because of the impact that it would have, the negative impact it would have on the other residents that it would get applied to.
I don't think we had a
So
motion.
don't we do it? So I need a motion to,
Motion to accept.
accept. I have a motion from Council Vidla, second from Council Ziegler. Any other questions regarding what the assessor just mentioned, that usually it's a nay?
Just a point of
Council
clarification.
Panicaro?
The motion to accept, meaning what is on the agenda stating that up to the 35%?
Yes,
Or
number
motion
one.
to accept the no vote?
No, this is just a residential exemption of the 35%, which we would be saying, if we vote no, it would be a unanimous no, and I think that's what the assessor is saying. So it would be.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other further discussion on this? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor?
No.
Opposed? No. It's unanimous no.
Thank you. Just wanted to move along to the nose. There you go.
Okay. Under number 2, I need a motion to approve an exemption of up to 20, what does that say?
25%.
25% of all property that may be classified as Class 2 open space. I need a motion to approve.
So moved.
I have a motion from Council Ziegler.
Second.
From Council Vidla for discussion. And again, please explain, because I know you said we have no open space, but just for the councilors.
We have no open space, so there wouldn't be any reason to vote in the affirmative.
Okay. So Council McCarthy.
So a yes and a no vote get you the same outcome, essentially. If I vote yes on the exemption for open space, there is no open space.
Correct.
Correct, Counselor. So all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
No?
No.
So we have 1 yes and 7 no. 1 absent. Okay. And now for the tax rate, a determination of the percentage of the tax levy to be borne by each class of property in fiscal year 2020. I need a motion to. I have a motion from Councilor Campagnon, second from Councilor Ziegler. Could you please, just for the record and for the people watching, explain what the tax rate increase dollar amount for both residential, commercial?
Please.
Okay, if you refer to pages 9 and 10 of the packet that you received, if you were to vote on the maximum shift, the residential tax rate would be $13.44 per thousand.
For a total of $188 per increase on the average home in Methuen.
Correct.
Average. And what is that price on the average home, if you don't mind disclosing that?
$355,280.
So $355,280 residents homeowners would receive a $188 increase in their tax bill, and as your home is assessed at more, your bill will raise as well.
That's correct.
Thank you. The next one would be the condo.
Same tax rate,
Okay.
$13.44 per thousand. The average condominium value is $272,973. That would result in a $143 increase.
And the two-family is, what's the average price there?
$385,466,
$466.
and that would be a $376 increase.
Okay, and on the commercial side, on page 10,
The proposed tax rate would be $26.59.
What is it, excuse me, what was that?
Commercial.
I
commercial.
know, the amount.
$26.59.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, and industrial,
So, and same tax rate for industrial, $26.59. The median value for a commercial property is $344,900. They would see a tax rate increase of $109. Industrial would actually see a decrease in taxes of approximately $291. Their median value is $201,300.
less though. Why did they take a decrease if they're industrial?
In the rate,
No, in the amount, it has, is that a decrease? Is that 291?
that's a decrease.
So their tax bill would be lower?
Because the median industrial value is fairly low. And it's just the way the commercial median value is heavier.
All right, any councils have any discussion here on this?
Yeah, why?
Yeah, just to add to that a little bit, if you could see at the top there, it shows the value, then when the valuation for the industrial values.
Talk right into there.
Sorry. The valuation for the industrial properties did not increase during this valuation process as commercial and residential did. So you can see at the top, 19 to 20, the change is only 0.65%, and because of that, the change in the, it affects the tax rate for that type of property. See, what's happening is with the rates that Michelle is talking about, the actual rate is going down from the prior year, but because the valuation is going up, there's still a little bit of an increase. If that valuation doesn't go up, the tax rate's still going down on those properties, so it wouldn't see that big of an increase. Does that make sense?
What was the tax increase last year, if you don't mind me asking?
86.
For commercial,
Residential.
residential's tax rate was $14.19.
And what was the tax
The
increase?
proposed rate for this year is $13.44.
No, but the dollar amount, do you have that?
For last year's increase?
For the average single-family home, it would have been approximately $160.
Any other questions, Council Saber?
Yeah, I gotta say, I've been trying for 2 years now to get clarification, and nobody's been able to explain this clearly, but with all of the new development going on, all of the $800,000 55 and older houses built that a few years ago were woods, okay? And we've gotten all this new development, and yet the average home, I know the valuation goes up, but the taxes continue to go up. And I understand you're gonna throw the tax levy calculation and all of this other scientific thing. I wish we can get a nice, clear explanation on that would explain how we can have so much new development of upper-level housing and haven't put in more fire stations, haven't done work in the infrastructure out there, haven't put new roads in, and yet our tax rate continues to skyrocket. Why don't we have a surplus?
Well, the rate isn't skyrocketing.
I understand that.
The amount, because the assessed valuations increase. Even with a lower rate, the calculation ends up that you're going to end up paying more in taxes. If you look at the condominium increase, they're seeing $143 because the median, there's still, with approximately 2,500 condominiums, we're still bottom heavy at the lower assessed valuations. So when you're looking at the sort of average in that middle figure, I mean, really 272,973 doesn't appear to be a very factual number, but that's what these increases are based on. So when we're talking about that $800,000 condo, their increase is going to be significantly higher. When we collect our new growth for the year, that $1 million in tax revenue is part of the calculation and does keep the rate from being higher than it could have been.
Okay, so condos did go up by 9.86%.
Yeah.
So everything's gone up on average.
Everything has gone up.
On average, everything's gone up.
Yes. So those condos, we only compare to condos.
So valuations have gone up. Even though the tax rate's low, we're bringing in more tax dollars.
Yes, because
We are bringing in more tax, and on top of that, we've added hundreds of $800,000 houses. Okay.
I just want to have a point of information on that, so, because you just said, a lot of those 55 and older developments are condos. Are they being assessed as condos or single-family houses?
no, condos,
So-
condominiums.
Condominiums.
Yes.
Okay, that was just something I wanted to know. All right. Anybody else, Council Kazanjian?
No, I remember it wasn't you, Michelle, that said this, but I remember last year, they said because Emerald Pines is growing and everything else, because I had asked the question, where's all that growth, all those permits, everything that went in? And they said, oh, you won't see that until next year. Well, lo and behold, this is next year compared to last year. And so we haven't seen that. I mean, and that's why it's a $188 increase.
Yes, without the new growth, your increase would have been double that amount, or could have been anywhere significantly higher. We did collect close to 1.1 million in new growth this year. So that has been credited, so to speak,
To
this.
that, wow.
Yes, it has.
Wow.
And that's why it's so important that we continue to collect new growth, which we will be for the next year or two. The Preserve has several units that are coming on board.
The mini Emerald Pines?
The mini, okay, the mini Emerald Pines. We have a couple of other developments that are going on. Those are the things that, we're looking for. Once that comes to an end, we won't be seeing those types of credits. You're going to see a difference in the tax rates.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Council Finicchio?
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, though it's not a conflict or an appearance of conflict, out of an abundance of caution, I did want to mention that some of the supporting documents is from the Board of Assessors, of which somebody who I am an independent contractor through, Janet McLennan, through her company, Century 21 McLennan and Company. So I did want to disclose that. Secondly, with regards to the discussion that we're having, I do hope that we will continue in this concern throughout the rest of the year, because this concern specifically is we are not having a vote whether or not we agree with tax increases. We are having a vote on where to shift the tax burden of which this council has already approved. So the 175 tax rate shift is actually a reduction. It's keeping the least amount of tax increases away from the residents versus burdening them with it. So if we want to reduce taxes overall, what we need to do is recognize that we have a spending issue and we can reduce our spending, and therefore these numbers, the effective numbers, not just the percentage rate change, will go down if we actually reduce our spending, which I believe this council has been working diligently to do, and I believe the next council will work diligently to do as well. But the topic of discussion that we're actually voting on is whether or not to adopt the 1.75 CIP factor for the percentages, not whether or not we agree with, increasing or decreasing taxes. It's how we are required by the Department of Revenue to shift that spending and funding that spending.
That is
Thank you.
correct.
So I do have
So
a
your
clarifying.
decision is whether you want to shift to your full capacity, which places a larger burden on the commercial, industrial, personal property, and alleviates some of the burden on the residential. Typically, in the past, I have a 10-year example on the spreadsheet that I included. You've always voted to shift to the maximum level available for that particular year. This year, the maximum shift is to the 175.
But it's also the tax rate, because I understand what Council Finicaro says, but there has been years that if it was too high, then the mayor took the budget back, and in fact, it was one year, I believe it was 2000 and, actually, I served with Council Kazanjian, because the tax rate at that time was about $159, and we were told when we were passing all the budgets and whatnot, we were looking at a $50 tax increase. And I sat in that chair over there at the time. I was not the chairperson of the council. And lo and behold, we got this document in front of us, and the tax increase for that year was going to be around $157, $159. Matter of fact, Councilor Saber was councilor-elect at the time. He was sitting in the audience, and I made a comment to the mayor at the time and said, well, that's not what you told us when we were passing the budget. We were passing the budget based on, what we thought the tax rate and what we needed at the end of the year, and you said $50. Now I have something in front of me 3 times the amount. I believe it was Councilor Kazanjian who made a motion to table this and have the mayor go into that budget and get that at least down to where a closer number, as you said, and we've heard all night, this is not an exact science, but you can't tell us one thing when we're passing a budget and then come back 6 months later when we are setting the tax rate. I know that we are setting, where the burden goes, but the rate is the rate, and the residents pay it, whether you're commercial or business. And our job is to make sure that, as Councilor Saber said, we're hearing new growth, we're hearing money coming in, but where is the money going, and what are the residents seeing with that money? So that's my concern. That was my concern then when I voted no for the 159, because a week later, when we came back and we asked them to go through the budget and cut where necessary, that's before this council came in and did a great job, in my opinion, in doing the budget. And we came back and there was a blank in front of us. There was nothing. They did nothing and just threw their hands up and said, that's the increase. So I do sometimes have concerns with the fact, as Councilor Saber mentioned, all this new growth, all this, money coming in, and honestly, it seems like every time budget season comes, we seem to have no money. And so that's just a concern. So we are voting, in essence, as well on a tax rate, is what the residents are going to pay.
Yes, the factor that you vote on will absolutely affect the tax rate.
Absolutely.
And I've given you several examples of what the tax rate change would be if you did not vote that particular factor. So instead of 1.75, or you could do 1.73, but your tax rate's going to go up 50 cents per thousand.
Right.
So I've given you that analysis, which is why you typically have always shifted to the max.
Are we using all the 2.5 that we're allowed to use right now? Is that what this, because I noticed that on one of the spreadsheets you gave us. I know some cities and towns just go right to the 2.5 where they're legally eligible to tax the residents. Is that the case in this in these numbers tonight in front of us?
Yes, because my understanding is that's what we want to do. You want to be right at or just below your levy limit. Maybe Maggie can speak to that a little bit more.
So we are basically right up against it. We have about 29,000, I think, in excess that's between where we're at and where we are. That is how the budget was created. That was the intent by the budget, and I know, Sean was part of that process and could probably speak to it as well. But the intent of the fiscal year 20 budget was to use the levy to capacity. So when it comes down to it, we need $93.3 million in order to fund the approved budget. And so what we're basically asking, how do we want to do that with the tax rate? Because that number needs to be what's funded. So whether it's shifted to the residents or if it's shifted to commercial, that's where we're coming to you.
Thank you for that. All righty then, any other questions here? Did you have the floor? Did you still have the floor? I don't know who the last one to speak was. Council Saber, go ahead, and then I'll let Council.
Okay, yeah, obviously, I'm gonna vote for the maximum shift for the lesser burden on the residents. And at that, we're ending up with a $188 increase on a $355,000 home. That's ridiculous, and we're gonna take a lot of hits, justifiably so. But on the other hand, we continue to do the maximum shift on businesses, and the new council, we're gonna have our hands full here, because look around at the storefronts. Look at, everyone's complaining about or worried about the impacts of some of these new developments like Tuscan Village and this and that, and we're trying to attract businesses into Methuen, and it's convenient for us as a council to just put the maximum shift every single year, but we're marking ourselves out of that market also. So, obviously, we are gonna have to do a better job with the budget and make some tougher decisions, because this is not okay. I mean, obviously, we have no other options to go below this $188 average increase, do we?
That's the maximum shift, so
That's the max, so there's nothing else that we can do to get that rate down tonight.
No, correct.
Well, the only other thing, point of information, one year it was 164% was the number. And that's, again, it's always at the end of the year, and this is the first time I can remember that we are actually going up against close to 2.5. That's why I asked that question. I just don't, it's just.
You can vote no.
17.
No, I don't.
You can vote no.
If we vote no, I'm just curious, if we vote no tonight, what happens?
Forces the mayor to take another look-see.
So I believe
Is that
2
correct
years
or no?
ago.
Again, I want to
Yep.
just be clear that we still need to raise the $93 million because the budget has already been approved. So this is for the shift, so it would go back, we could provide additional information on the shift, but I don't think
But it
that's,
hasn't been spent.
there's no additional.
The whole budget hasn't been spent yet.
Right, that's what happened last year, that year with Zani. Yes, of course.
I have the pleasure of being here tonight. Last year, you did go to the full levy, you did use the full 2.5%. For fiscal 19, you did.
We had no levy capacity after that?
Like a rounding error. 3 or 4 years ago, from memory, you were maybe $1 million, $1.5 million, $2 million somewhere of what's called excess capacity. But fiscal 19, you pretty much used it all, and this year you're using all. That's because, you got to remember, and I know it's kind of a weird process, but there's a disconnect from when you vote a budget in June, and now here in November, December, you're voting a tax rate. So it's easy to talk now about, well, geez, why are the taxes going up so much? Those are discussions you should be having when you're saying, well, how much property taxes do I need to balance this budget?
We did.
If you think that that's too much, you cut. That's kind of the simple way to explain it. So let me just say one thing in terms of if you don't take a vote, I don't know the exact dates, but I can tell you that by law, you are not allowed to issue preliminary third quarter tax bills. So if you don't have a tax rate set, you won't be able to issue third quarter tax bills. Then you have a cash flow problem, and things kind of spiral south like that. But and I will say one other thing just about the new growth discussion. In theory, new growth pays for itself. So the properties, which I don't know that you're talking about, but generated new growth, the $800,000 homes. So they're paying their tax bill. You guys are using that money to balance your budget. So you could have a discussion, I'm not saying you should, I'm just saying you could have a discussion during the budget cycle that says, what's your estimate for new growth? $1 million. Okay, leave it on the table and force a discussion on the budget. But if you do that now, I mean, you guys going to find, is the council going to find whatever the dollar amount is out of a budget, you know, almost halfway through a fiscal year? You know, I think that's
I believe that question
would be
was
very
asked.
difficult to do, but legally, you can't issue preliminary third quarter tax bills without, unless you get special legislation to do so. So, you know, the closer you get toward the end of the fiscal year, that time crunch, you know, you could get in a situation that you don't want, which is no cash coming in. So, I don't know if that's helpful or not, but.
Can I ask one last question?
Sure.
Are we all the cherry, any other state funding is all exhausted at this point?
I wouldn't use the word exhausted, I would say it's all accounted for. So when the budget was approved in June, you had property taxes, you had the state aid numbers, and remember, you actually assumed the higher state aid numbers when you balanced the budget in June. Fortunately, those came in that way, the Senate numbers came in. So all the numbers that you had in June to balance the budget are still being used. So, you know, absent some new, you know, local revenue stream, there's nothing. You know, like if you open up a pot shop or something, and then you got that excise, then you could, you know, before you set a tax rate, account for that, but, you know.
Thank you.
Council Finicaro.
Did I say something wrong about a pot shop? I got a
Yeah,
couple.
no, that's all right.
Counselor Saba, just for reference, page 7 of the packet I gave you, I think will show you, and even Counselor Kazanjian might answer your question about the levy limit, new growth, and that kind of stuff, and the excess capacity is just under $30,000 this year. So that might answer some of your questions. The new growth was 1.148. It's pretty good number for new growth. That's a strong number. We were fortunate to have it. I hope we do a little bit better next year, but it depends on, you know, what the builders do. But that page 7 might answer some of your questions about how that new growth is calculated and how it's applied to this.
So last question then, again, one more last question. So what if values went down? What if we had a recession, the valuations went down? We're already at the limit,
Your tax rate would increase.
but we're at 2.5 right now.
However, your new growth figure would be different, your total assessed valuation would be different, so your shift, your factor would be different. You wouldn't be allowed to go to the 1.75.
Okay.
Correct. That's what happened. Okay, Counselor, are you all set?
I'm all set,
Okay,
thank you.
Counselor Finicaro.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just wanted to clarify, because I know this is probably confusing to some of the residents who are watching. So a yes vote is shifting the 1.75 factor so that it costs the least amount for residents is a yes vote. A no vote would be either an amendment for a different amount, which would be to lean the cost more towards the residents or away from the commercial enterprise. However, there is a third button, which would be that we could potentially open the budget and make reductions. However, there's issues with timing that have been specified. For me, you know, I know that I made cuts during the budget process that were not approved. I know that the same thing can be said for some of the other counselors. So if the council does want to go through that process in a rushed fashion to make sure we don't hit up against those deadlines, I would be in favor of that. But if that is not the case and that amendment is not made here today, I do believe that it's incumbent on our elected officials to pay for what they bought. And I remember a couple years ago being concerned when there was discussions of using reserve funds to lower the tax increases. And as a new coming counselor, I was concerned at what position that would put us financially in the future. So reminding myself of how I felt when I was a new counselor, and I did not want that burden shifted onto me for my term. Unless the amendment or a motion to table or a motion to open the budget is made, then my vote will be yes in favor of making sure that the residential taxes are the lowest allowable under the Department of Revenue. Thank you.
Thank you. And there is just one more mechanism if you vote no because you disagree with the amount of the tax increase. And I remember it was the same year, Councilor, that you were in the audience with Council Saber, and the reason why we were talking about using stabilization or free cash was because of the fact that we were told $50 and it increased, and we were thinking of ways. So there are ways you can lower the burden to the taxpayer because, again, it's every year. They take a hit every single solitary year, and it's very easy to say, well, you know, we're shifting the burden from the businesses, and as Councilor Saber said, you know, the business, we don't want to scare the businesses away, but it's just, again, and I was here during the Great Recession when the tax rate was higher because the residential property prices were lower, but it's always a hit, so that's it. Okay, any other further discussion, Councilor Ziegler?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that, you know, this is an important lesson for us as a council to have a more in-depth conversation about the impact on the property tax rate during the budget process. We did have a preliminary discussion, but I don't think it was as in-depth as we needed to really understand what figures we were going to be seeing this late in the game. Understanding that, you know, it would have been projections that we would have been talking about, and there would have been some variation, but we would have been closer. That would have impacted some of our cuts. But another thing that we also need to be more mindful of is building up our stabilization, because our stabilization does impact the tax rate. And if we had more funds within our stabilization account, then maybe these numbers may have been different moving forward. So while it's difficult, because though there's a decrease, there's still an increase to the residents. It is the least amount of increase possible, but I think if we're actively working together as a council to look at ways to build up our stabilization, to have more conversations about ways to decrease these rates, I think that will put us in a better position for next year.
I would highly recommend that we, maybe from this point forward, have more open conversations about that during May, April, you know, when we're talking about the budget and working together on that. I do recall Madam Chair's comments about the $50 increase and it turning out to be something much different. I was here then, and it was unfortunate because that was a number that wasn't discussed with anyone, and there was no basis for that number, and it was not a number that was recommended to be put out there. So unfortunately, I would hope that that would never happen again. I hope that maybe the CAFO and I could maybe participate during the next budget process and see if we can come up with some better numbers, estimates, to give you a better understanding then what you need to do to help keep the tax rate at a minimal increase. Tonight, what you're actually doing is voting on the factor. You're not necessarily voting a yes or a no. You're deciding on what factor you want to apply towards the taxes so that we know which proportion is going to go towards which rate, whether it be the commercial rate or the residential rate. So I don't know if it's really a yes or a no vote. It's an actual, what factor are you going to vote on?
Any other?
We are a little early in the process, earlier than we normally are. If you've recalled in the past, we've been here mid-December. So although I don't recommend it, if it is something that you want to revisit, I think if we met again at the next regular council meeting, we would still be okay time-wise. Past that point, we might be cutting it a little bit close to get approval to put tax bills out on the road.
Can we make a motion for the maximum tax rate? So I'd like to make a motion that we vote.
I've
Hold
got
on,
a
I'm
question.
sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But now, with what you said, you're voting for the factor, but as we vote for the factor, we're voting for a $188 tax increase.
If you vote for the maximum
Right, the
factor,
1.75, the way
Yes.
you've laid it out.
that will be,
Okay, no, I just
tax
wanted to make
rate
it
of-
very clear that that's what it is. It's strictly not on factors or on, that element of it. It's on, you vote for the 1.75 factor, you're voting for a $188 increase.
that would be correct.
Thank you.
So I just want to say one thing too. Michelle, you were right. You gave a very good package to the council tonight, which was a heck of a lot more information than we've ever received. I hope and I stress that, in January, the new council, you give them whatever, all this information and do exactly what you said, because there were questions, I can't remember from who, but there was talk, and I believe this budget that we passed had a lot of bare bones. I can't say right now what was the difference between the year before, our first year together, and last year, but it's still gonna be a tax increase from a lot of the houses that, and I don't know if our budget was that much higher in FY '19 as '20, so do that for the councilors, so that they understand this process. Because I think
Absolutely.
that's where the confusion comes in, is the process. Okay, anybody else? Okay, Council Saber?
And by the way, on the budget, that year when we were sitting in the audience and you voted no, 2 weeks later, the mayor came back with the same amount, so nothing changed. We have opened the budget, we've done everything we could. I'd like to make the motion
We have the motion
We have that motion for the
for the, we have the motion for the maximum. Where did that paper go that I just had? Yeah, we had that motion and a second. We were in discussion process right now. So it is at the tax levy. I think we do have to say the number, though, don't we have to
Yes.
say the number? So why don't you recite the number that you have requested from the council?
So the residential factor that you would be voting on this evening would be 88.4510.
And that's residential.
That's the residential.
We'll take that one first, and then we'll go to the...
That's all you have to vote
That's
on.
all we have to vote on.
Yes.
So I have the motion that was originally made by Council Campagnon, seconded by Council Ziegler, for the residential factor of 88.451. Any further discussion on that number? Hearing and seeing none, can you do a roll call? Councilor,
So my only question is clarification, and I saw some rustling around at the table too. So the information that we were given was a CIP factor of 1.75 with a residential rate of 13.44. And so you're wanting us to vote on the actual residential factor itself, not on the rate, or do you need an actual vote on the
No,
rate?
correct.
Because I thought that last year we did the rate of the, 13.44 and 26.59, no?
No, you vote on the factor. The CIP factor automatically is attached to that residential factor, and those rates would automatically apply to that number.
Okay.
You're voting on the factor.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're voting on what we
Yes.
just discussed. Thank you.
Thank you. And any further discussion on that? The clerk will call the roll.
Counsel McCarty,
Yes.
Counsel Saber,
Yes.
Counsel Vidla,
Yes.
Counsel Ziegler,
Yes.
Counsel Campagnon.
Yes.
Counsel Finicaro.
Yes.
Counsel Hamilton's absent. Counsel Kazanjian.
No.
And Chairperson Canal.
No.
6 yes, 2 no.
6 yes, 2 no, it passes.
And I'll be passing this one.
Okay, and then the clerk will be passing a paper for the council to sign regarding that passage. Okay, the next order of business is, what?
Do you want to have Maggie actually say something about the paper versus going into
Yes,
the office?
Maggie, will you come up to the podium for 1 second? And just explain to the other councilors here, Linda's gonna just be distributing that signature paper, just so that they know what they will be signing.
Sure. I don't know if you remember, but last year, part of the approval is that we have to approve it in the Department of Revenue's gateway system. So I believe last year you all had to go in and log in to the online system and electronically sign off. And so we talked to the state about it this year to see if there was any way that we could streamline that a little bit. And they said if we printed out the LA5 that reflected what we voted on tonight, that a manual signature on that from the majority of council would qualify instead of having everybody go on and electrically sign. So I had given that before the meeting, just in case it did pass, that we could get those signatures and get that done so that you don't have to go online.
Thank you, Maggie.
Yep.
Okay, so that's the paper circulating. Does it have to be in the affirmative, or does everybody sign it no matter what?
Just sign if you approve it.
Only if you approved it. Thank you. You don't sign it,
All right,
George.
so I voted no, so I don't have to sign it. Correct.
Thank you. All right, other offices and committee reports, Council McCarty, I'll start with you.
Yes, Madam Chair, through you, no update on the chicken committee. However, our cannabis committee is now meeting again over our little bit of a layover. I think the public hearing is the reasoning why. We are going to get together and discuss, some of the concerns that were said. And we will be meeting either November 21st, which is this Thursday, Monday, December 2nd, or Tuesday, December 3rd. Based on some of the preliminary responses, it looks like we're going to be meeting this Thursday. That's not set in stone yet, but that's when I'm available. That's when Chief Solomon is available. So that is the front runner. Probably get that confirmed tomorrow.
It'll be posted, Counselor.
We are a closed meeting group. We're a quote-unquote working group, so we don't follow the public meeting requirements. And so, see where that discussion comes. It's going to be tough because a lot of the commentary on that, this is just my take. I'm not speaking for the working group at this point, but as a counselor, I think, emphasized 5 or 6 times that there are no pot shops coming here in Methuen, and yet a majority of the folks came up to that podium with their script saying that they don't want pot shops. So I don't know if there's some type of block there, and we're going to do our best to educate, and it looks like we have our work cut out for us. So we're going to be getting back together this Thursday to discuss the input of the public hearing.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Ziegler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So as part of the Economic Development Committee, the Methuen Day Planning Team did meet last Thursday at 12:30 here in the Great Hall to just do a debrief of Methuen Day. Ultimately, the group was very pleased with the turnout.
Can you speak into the mic so we can hear?
Ultimately, the group was very pleased with the turnout of the event. We will be meeting early next year to begin planning for next year's event. We've already discussed several ways to expand the event, potentially expanding the route of the event to allow for even more vendors and more interactive activities, which were highly favored by the group. So during our next meeting, I'll be informing the council of next year's Methuen Day's date, so you can mark your calendars.
Great, thank you. Counselor Vidla.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As a result of tonight's decision to appoint Kelly Hebert into the fiscal analyst position for not to exceed 1 year. I will then follow up with the Collins Center and ask for their engagement with Kelly to offer the position, which would be part-time, and per the stipulation of the vote. I will get back to you as soon as we know more.
Thank you, Counselor, for all your work on that, too. Under old businesses, we have resolutions TR-19-81, a resolution in act relative to amending a certain provision of the Methuen Home Rule Charter, creating the position and appointing authority of the Assistant City Solicitor under the authority and jurisdiction of the Methuen City Council. This is a request of Councilor Saber. I need a motion to remove from the
So moved.
table.
Second.
I have a motion from Councilor Campagnon, second from Councilor Ziegler. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? It's unanimous. Now I need a motion to approve.
So moved.
I have a motion from Council Campagnon, second from Council Ziegler. Any discussion? I know we have an amended version as requested by Council McCarty, but I will start with Council McCarty and then Council Saber.
Yes, just a procedural question through you. The last time we as a group handled this, it does not have the amended language, so I don't know if we have to formally make that amendment to accept the amended version that was circulated prior to this meeting. Because I think as is, we haven't, as a group, made that amendment yet. It was...
Okay, I know Council Saber wanted to make an amendment. Do you want to see if that suffices? Do you want to read the amendment?
He might have the amendment that I'm talking about, Madam
Okay,
Chair.
let's
I do
hear
have
from
the
him.
amendment, but, so before I make that, I have a question for the solicitor. You wrote the amendment in, but instead of elected by ballot or otherwise, shouldn't that be appointed?
Through you, Madam Chair, what I did, Counselor, was mirror the language of the appointment of the other council employees in that regard. The major change, that is how it's written for the solicitor, because that's how it's actually done at the odd year. It's by ballot means by vote of the council. The thing that I did change was the language that upon their removal or failure to be elected and/or re-elected by ballot or otherwise, the Assistant City Solicitor shall immediately vacate the position. That is a major change that I made in the language, and you'll see that even, I don't know if you want to make that same, reflect that same language in the change in the fiscal analyst. That language does also mirror what the current language is. The reason I made that change is that there was, normally when a person is terminated or not reappointed, there can be some animosity and arises, and we saw it in the past. And that individual then has an opportunity to engage in skullduggery that will affect the process going forward to appoint a replacement. I do have personal experience in it, so that maybe that's why it was fresher on my mind than otherwise. But the incumbent attempted to sabotage the process, and did so, frankly, and remained in office much longer than the council had wanted that incumbent to, and also accessed personal and private information, that privilege that should not have been available to the incumbent. And in private industry, as harsh as it may sound, if you're terminated, they walk you out the door the same day, put your things in a box, and say thank you for your service. So I just think that change and down going forward should probably be made for all council employees, so that there is nothing engaged. Listen, it's human nature to not be happy if you've been terminated from your position. So to attempt to blunt some of the possible negative reaction, that is why I added that language. But that was the major. The rest of it does mirror the solicitor's language in the charter.
Okay.
Counselor, is that acceptable to you, the amendment?
I have no problem with the bolded language that was circulated. I know Councilor Saber had a question about the word of appointment. I have no objections to what the solicitor had just said.
All righty then, any other questions here?
Do we have to make a motion to amend?
Yeah, we'll do a motion, no, because as amended? We can adopt it as amended, so I will do that. So we'll do a motion to adopt it as amended.
Second.
Do we have to make the amendment? We haven't done that yet.
We can read that, I'll have the vice chair read that into record.
The whole
No, just the section 3.
Section 3 amendment. The city council shall, on or before January 15th in odd-numbered years, elect by ballot or otherwise an assistant city solicitor to hold office for a term of 2 years until his/her removal or failure to be re-elected by ballot or otherwise on or before January 15th in odd-numbered years. Upon that removal or failure to be elected and/or re-elected by ballot or otherwise, the Assistant City Solicitor shall immediately vacate the position.
So I need a motion to approve
So
the
moved.
amended
Second.
version. I have a motion from Council Campagnon, second from Council Ziegler. Any further discussion on this item? Hearing and seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous.
Madam Chair, I have a question on this procedurally. What is the next step for this to go through? Is this going,
If I may, Madam Chair,
Yes.
through you. Council, what I'll do is I will prepare this along with a document that contains the names, addresses of all the councilors and the mayor. You, as individuals, will have to sign that. It'll be in the council office. At that point, I will also prepare language for the legislative body, and we will forward this as a formal request to the legislature for their action. So I'll
You'll
just
keep
add,
us
I'll be
updated on
adding
the
some more
progress?
things. You had seen previously, if you looked at the other one, I had inadvertently left a page of some older councilors, other councilors, and hadn't made the changes and all. That was from a prior, different home rule petition, but it'll be it's very similar in format. I'll leave a copy in the council office within the next couple of days, and you'll be able to sign it. I will also, as I did with this last week, forward it to your attention via email so that you can get a chance to look at it if you do have any comments or concerns prior to coming in to sign. So that when you first see it in the council office, it won't be your first view of the document.
Okay, thank you. That good?
I just want to make sure we expedite this, that's all. Thank you.
Great. Under ordinances, we have none. Under consideration of appointments under the Cultural Council, John Richard Roscoe, a term to expire 11/18/2022.
Motion to appoint.
I have a motion from Council
Second.
Campagnon, second from Council Ziegler. Any discussion on this? Council McCarty?
Yes, I voted present during the last appointment. I believe that appointments from the mayor as of October 1 should be left to the incoming administration. I'm going to remain consistent in my present vote. I do know that the Chief of Staff, Paul Fahey, had come up to me and explained that this is a different circumstance and that, you know, without this appointment, we had some members of this council resign. I had asked why. I forget what he said. In that the cause of concern I had is that, you know, we need this to have a quorum to receive monies, and yet this cultural council can have up to 22 members on it. I believe we have somewhere around 4, and now it's our problem where if we don't, you know, accept this, then we lose money. I don't like that. I don't like, you know, the ultimatum where if you don't do this, this happens. But, you know, we should have 22 people on this board. I don't know if the chief of staff wanted to come up and echo what he had told me. And then he had said, well, if you could find 15 people to put on this board, I mean, I think we could take up that as a council, a little subcommittee, if we really had to. But to have this just dumped on us now, I mean, I'm still voting present, but I'm just dissatisfied with what I had gotten from the chief of staff, Paul Fahey.
Chief of Staff.
Madam Chair, through you to all of the councilors, I knew that Councilor McCarty had expressed a concern about the mayor exercising his due authority during this period of time. So I wanted to clarify the fact that we did in fact have 2 members of the Cultural Council, longstanding members, the chair and the secretary, who submitted their resignations to the mayor. I won't get into the reasons, but they were personal. They were not anything to do with dissatisfaction with the council. At the same time, we were approached by the Mass Cultural Council that reaches out to all cities and towns and works with their local cultural councils. And they identified a concern to us that, as the councilor said, as I shared with him earlier, there is the potential to have, under the legislation, up to 22 members. There is no requirement to have 22 members. The only requirement is that there be a quorum. And with the resignation of 2 members, we would be in a situation where there would not be a quorum. We do receive money every year from the state that the Cultural Council then grants to cultural associations, organizations in Methuen. And absent a quorum, given the timing of this, they would not be able to do so. So the mayor is taking the minimal action required to ensure that we do not lose that money. It is challenging to find individuals to serve on these boards and commissions. We are fortunate, I will share with the council as well, that we will be submitting 1 or 2 additional names to ensure that we have that quorum, because we did have 2 resignations. We have a 3rd member that has not expressed whether he wants to continue to serve. He's been an inactive member of that commission. Traditionally, this commission has really only met once a year to actually do this exercise of doing these grants. So there's certainly a desire to try to reinvigorate. We had a conversation with the mayor-elect, an initial transition meeting, and raised this issue with him so that he was aware of this and that we were simply ensuring that we would not lose this money. So this individual is willing to serve, and we will have other appointments for the next city council meeting to ensure that we don't lose that money. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, any other discussion on this appointment? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Present.
It's, Council McCarty will be recorded as present. Thank you. Under new business, we have Resolution TR-19-83, a resolution authorizing a home rule petition to act to strengthen legislative oversight of the city finances in the city of Methuen. I need a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Second. I have a motion from Council Campion, Council Kazanjian, second from Council Ziegler. Any discussion on this? Council McCarty?
Thank you. My question to the council is, where did this home rule originate from? I know our last one came from Council Saber. I don't know who the author of this is.
This one here, I believe it's, would you please come up here? Either one of you. Whoever wants to come up.
Madam Chair, I'll only speak briefly. The Fiscal Stability Officer will address the concerns. We agreed to submit this to the council on his behalf. We're in support of what he's trying to do. It's very consistent with work you've already done, but with your permission, I would ask him to speak to the specifics of this.
Just prior, Madam Chair, if I may, and sorry, Mr. Cronin, for interrupting, but I just want to inform the council through you that I was asked to review this and did so. Mr. Cronin did run this by me prior to presentation.
Thank you.
That was a joint effort between lawyers in my office and the city solicitor. So that's where it came from.
Thank you.
Okay, when I read this, just the quick hand change that I see is that the town accountant, city auditor, whatever the title may be, is being sent under the direction of DAF, Department of Administrative Finance, which I assume is part of the CAFO's team. So when I read this title that says an act to strengthen legislative oversight of city finances in the city of Methuen, I see myself as a legislator in the city of Methuen, and so I'm not sure how this act strengthens my oversight of city finances when the town accountant, city auditor, who has also always been a member of the legislative branch, is now exiting the legislative branch. I see this as a legislative weakening of oversight in city finances, and I'm not sure if you could just correct my quick hand assumption of this.
Well, I totally disagree that it's weakening anything. If anything, it's been proven in Technicolor that this change needs to be made, and that's why we're proposing this. But in terms of the title, you can call it whatever you want through the city solicitor, I assume, but...
Okay, I just remember when we were doing this initial home rule to borrow, I was strongly against losing our city auditor, town accountant. I thought that the fiscal analyst was a severe watering down of the authority that we once had. And so if this is an act to ask me to transfer over our town accountant, city auditor, I'd be voting no. I just try to foresee the day where we pay off this bond, fiscal stability officer is no longer here, and we don't know who our CAFO may be, if they're still here, or whether it's someone who, I don't know, is tightly aligned with the mayor, since they're the appointing authority on that. I look for the council foreseeability of having oversight and actual strength in the city finances. So I am going to be voting no on this one. I would never vote to give away authority, so that's where I'm at.
Just want to highlight the fact that you voted on a budget that included this exact thing, just for the record.
Right, but in that budget, since you brought it up, we were told we can't address line items, correct? So if we're voting bottom line percentages or categories, then even if we wanted to do what you just said, we wouldn't have been able to, because we weren't allowed to address actual individual line items.
I'm just expressing the fact that you voted for a budget that included this with org charts, tables that showed the elimination of the city auditor position. And, you know, we had this discussion, and it's democracy, we agree and we disagree. We had this discussion multiple times after the original home rule petition that at least a majority of the group agreed that the right thing to do was to put the day-to-day accounting, that's all this is, and I don't mean to minimize it, but the day-to-day accounting under the CAFO. It's the executive branch of government. They're responsible for the day-to-day operation. We had this discussion before. The majority thought it was the way to go. If you look at well-run municipalities across the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, that's what you'll see. You'll see the day-to-day accounting under a executive branch. And that's what this does.
Okay, when you said you voted on the budget, you're responsible for the $188 increase, and this budget, FY 2020 budget, we had budget consultants in here, we had you in here, we had your whole team in here, and we were told this is bare bones, not a whole lot to cut, please don't do what you did in FY 19. And then so we took your advice, your consultation, and now we're looking at a $188 increase. And then you come up here and say, well, you should have cut it. And it's just like, you can't have it both ways.
Exactly, you can't have it both ways. And I can guarantee you, I never said don't cut a budget. What this body needs to do, and I heard that you're going to do it, or the next body in the future, is during a budget discussion, ask what the impact on the tax bill is. It's pretty easy to go through a budget process and give all the constituencies what they want, and then when it comes time to set a tax rate, say, why are we increasing taxes on our poor homeowners? You know, that's a pretty easy thing to do. You need to have those discussions as part of a budget process, and going forward with a CAFO, with a strong finance team that's going to present real good information for you all, you'll be able to have that discussion at that point in time. Right. But I can guarantee you I did not say, don't cut a budget. And we brought in professional staff to put a budget together, a real document with historical information and org charts so that everybody could have an understanding as to what you were voting on, not a spreadsheet that really didn't have much information. So that's what the consultants were brought in to do.
And I just wish that in your reports, if we have a transfer of $600,000 to the police department to support an MOU, that you say you probably shouldn't do that, rather than saying you can do what you want, it's free cash, fire away.
All right,
I just haven't seen you in any of your reports say, you know, don't spend this, don't approve that.
It's because it's not my role. I don't tell you what to spend. Make sure you comply with the law. That's what I do. And there's been many instances where we've made sure that you do things differently because the way things were done in the past weren't legal. Now they are. That's what I'm here for. I'm not here to tell you what to cut out of a budget. You're the legislative branch of government. You're the appropriating authority. You do what you want in terms of level of services. I make sure that you comply with Prop 2.5 and all the municipal finance statutes that are on the books.
Okay, and I just look to continue this line item discussion when the next budget comes.
It's not up for discussion. It's the law.
Like I said, when that time comes, we'll talk about the Division of Local Services and what they suggest. Okay.
Sure.
Thank you. All set, Counselor? Counselor McCarty, all set?
Yeah, you're about to cut me off, so
Oh,
I felt like I was...
wasn't about, when I cut you off, you'll hear the gavel. Anybody else want to speak on this? Counselor Finocchiaro?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I actually, I do agree with some of the concerns of Councilor McCarty, but I feel like I see it through a different lens. We actually took, in my opinion, this vote already. I was actually not in favor of us changing from the city auditor position to a CAFO, and then that was not something that I was in favor of, but I was in the minority and majority rules. Then as far as the fiscal analyst position, I wanted that to be full-time person to represent the council. Again, I was in the minority and majority rule. So my understanding and according to what the fiscal stability officer has laid out in our letter, that I know that the residents don't have in front of them, but this letter says that this is mirroring the language of those previous votes that we already took, due to the fact that our charter changes are not approved currently. So we are making this change to our charter in the meantime so that we legally can have a fiscal analyst in the appropriate way. And you know, I'm happy if I'm incorrect in my understanding of that. I would ask the solicitor to correct me. But if that is what we're voting on, then my vote is yes. Do I want us to have a fiscal analyst that is less than what we had for a city auditor? No, but I feel like we already took that vote and I lost. So this vote is a vote on whether or not we are changing our current charter, because the new charter isn't approved yet, to make sure that we have the power to even have a fiscal analyst, given that we already have the power to have a CAFO and that language is already there. This is adding in and correcting the inconsistencies for the meantime, which I am in favor of. And I'll like to, through you, Madam Chair, give the floor to the city solicitor to just either confirm what I said or to let me know if I was incorrect in my understanding.
Through you, Madam Chair, the nutshell version, councilors, yes, you're correct. As the current charter stands, it is now, frankly, a falsehood. There is no longer the accountant. The CAFO position was created by special act of legislature. The charter was changed. You'll remember language in the home rule petition, which was quite lengthy, that said, notwithstanding any provision of state law or the charter, this is now what's going to be. Notwithstanding, again, meaning that despite what the charter may say. To clean it up so that no one comes along and says, well, there's still a city auditor in the charter. No. That was actually replaced with the special legislation. You're now cleaning up officially the position and, frankly, moving such a type of position under the executive branch. But you are also establishing what financial individual will be a council employee, as opposed to what the charter says right now, that it's a city auditor. No, it's not. It's going to be the fiscal analyst.
Thank you very much. I do want to say, through you, Madam Chair, to the FSO, I do agree with Councilor McCarty in that it'd be great to have continued conversations about the next budget in advance, and look forward to having those continued conversations with my current colleagues and incoming councilors. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other, Councilor Kazanjian?
I just have one thing, and please correct me if I'm wrong. The reason we have a CAFO today is because we needed to borrow $4 million, and the state required that we have a CAFO in the organization.
Correct.
Because the school department overspent illegally $4 million. Okay,
Correct.
so that is the, all right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just have a question to piggyback on Councilor Kazanjian's question, just for the public, because a lot of different stories have been coming to me as the chair, and if you or the city solicitor could state for the record, so we have the $4 million overspending, we have the new law 278 that states we have a CAFO, and also we as a council designated what type of oversight we want. We chose the first level, which was a fiscal stability officer, and you were appointed. If and when the money is paid off, before the 10 years that this council, I believe we all said we wanted a 10-year note for $500,000 that we're going to pay. However, if that changes, and let's just say year 3, it's paid off, I understand that you would go with the loan, so we no longer would have the luxury of having you opine and do all the stuff that you have done to get us back onto financial stability. Does the CAFO, because it's now part of our charter, no matter what, still stay in the city?
The answer is yes, and it's also because it's in Chapter 278, which supersedes your charter.
Okay,
So yes, the Department of Administration and Finance, which is headed by your CAFO, remains.
And does the state at that point, because I know we have the Secretary of A&F at one point, does appoint a member if this CAFO or a new CAFO comes in? Once the loan is paid off, does the Secretary of A&F have any jurisdiction over the screening committee that would allow the cities, I don't know if it's just Methuen, but any other CAFO, or is that just something for the legislative body here to pick their own screening committee?
I can't recall, but I think the answer is yes, but I'll have to go back. I
Okay,
can't
that's
remember
fine.
that.
I just want to make sure, because how I look at it, and I'm leaving, I believe that we needed at least the eyes of yourself and a new division coming in, and I definitely see I definitely see the tide turning into more fiscal stability, and I think there is some work to be done, and I just don't want to lose everything that we have accomplished in the event that note gets paid off. So as long as I know that the CAFO is here and they'll have a team underneath them, I think that's good fiscal oversight for the city. I still wish, though, as Councilor McCarty said, and I did say this a few times, that I do wish that we still had that, because, but as you strenuously told me, not only here but in other meetings, that that's what you feel that is the best for our communities, and you've seen it work. So that's good enough for me to vote yes. Any other questions, Councilor Saber?
Yeah, I mean, again, we gave up the auditor when we brought in a CAFO. As my fellow councilor has said, the auditor no longer exists. Now the CAFO is adding, or we're looking to add a city accountant. It's a totally different position. So we did already give that position up, but you know, we're also bringing over an assistant solicitor as well as the financial analyst. So I think this is a done deal at this point. So I'm ready to vote.
All right, anybody else before we take the vote? Okay, hearing and seeing none. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Put Council McCarty is recorded, please. Thank you. Okay, the next is
Thank
TR.
you.
Thank you. The next is TR-19-84, a resolution authorizing transfers of $324,000 from water and sewer retained earnings to fund a chemical fee and an HVAC upgrade. I need a motion to approve.
So moved.
I have a motion from Councilor Campagnon.
Second.
Second from Councilor Ziegler. Any discussion on this item? Councilor Fedicaro, I would assume that the interim director of the DPW come up and answer any questions, and maybe even the CAFO. Councilor Fedicaro.
So that was actually all that I was going to ask, was that the director inform us of the reasons so that the public understands of why this was in a rush and why this is considered something that needs to be done now, and why we would be using those funds.
Sure. We have a potential violation coming up in our chemical storage room. We have a room about half the size of this that holds 10,000 gallons of hazardous chemicals. The ventilation system is failing in there. We need to get that repaired and upgoing so we don't have any issues. And also the chemical feed lines that go into that outside of the building, pushing 38 years old. We need to get those upgraded.
If I could just add to that too, the other part of that question was why it was rushed. So this actually is a project that has been there. However, they had a 5-year plan for capital improvements with the water treatment plant. And there was miscommunication in the past about whether we were going to be borrowing debt or not. I think the original 5-year plan, correct me if I'm wrong, was to borrow debt every year. I think they got to year 2, and this was last year, and so there was a halt put on that, and I honestly wasn't going to approve the project until we had our retained earnings certified and made sure that we were in a good place. And this is a piece of some of the capital project improvements that I know that they're looking to do. But because it's a smaller capital improvement, I felt it was appropriate to use those retained earnings for something that was both a safety issue and a smaller capital improvement. It's a good use of those retained earnings now that they've been approved.
Thank you very much. So with the documents that you gave to us, this is indeed using basically our savings account instead of going out to borrow money, correct?
Correct.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Hearing and seeing none, all those, I'm sorry, Councilor Bidler.
Pardon me.
Sorry.
I just had a couple of questions. When the renovations were done on the water treatment plant, when was that?
2006, 2005 area.
So about 15 years
Yep.
ago. And the renovations did not include to the ventilation system?
There was some made. It's not adequate enough.
Okay. And
Very corrosive chemicals it's breaking down.
And you said, and I believe I've been in that room.
Yes.
So, and you said it's potentially failing?
Well, we have 3 air handlers in there. 1 is down. The second is carrying the load, and the third is the emergency. If there is ever a spill, there's a button we hit and it clears the room.
Okay.
So that's what we're working on right now.
And then the last question I had to do with, was this project on the capital improvement plan that has been in discussion, but yet we as a council have not seen as of yet? Was it in the mix to be vetted out?
Yes, it was.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions? Hearing and seeing none, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Ordinances, there are none. End of request of councilors. Councilor McCarty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd ask Paul Fahey to come up to the
Chief of Staff.
Do we have, through you to Chief of Staff, do we have an update on the holiday celebrations?
Yes. They will be held, as was previously stated, on Saturday, December 7th at the Loop. The question about the Christmas tree has been resolved. There is a tree that has been chosen. I know the details are being finalized. It is being sponsored by a business owner who sponsored the tree last year. I think the big question everyone has is 40 feet tall. The tree will be 40 feet tall.
How tall is the last one?
30 feet.
Whoa. Progress.
Yes.
I had a constituent reach out concerned about the 5 corners. There was the repainting done, and it's actually a business owner, operates a barber shop, and the stop line, for some reason or the other, I was sent a picture, was repainted almost from here to, it was like in excess of 10, 12 feet, and then that new stop line is actually obstructing the driveway, and it's significantly affecting the business there. So I was wondering if you've heard that yet, and if there was a course of action to resolve possibly doing a repainting back to where it originally was. If you,
Madam Chair, I have not heard that specifically, but I will address that with the DPW and with Economic Development tomorrow and get a response to the council.
I was going to send you a message tomorrow with the picture, and then I was going to Maria, DPW, and then Community Development as well. Okay.
Yeah.
And my last concern was over the weekend there was a little bit of scuttlebutt relative to the police department. I had heard that the chief was putting officers into acting roles, which I know is his discretion because there are some vacancies in captain and lieutenant. And then he had also suspended multiple sergeants for what I heard was no due cause, and I know that I don't have, necessarily the best reports that the mayor does, but I didn't know if you could bring light to any of those allegations.
Madam Chair, I'm not going to comment on personnel matters that are currently being addressed by the department. There are always vacancies. As you know, there was a proposal to appoint a permanent lieutenant that was withdrawn. The chief does have, under the mayor's authority, the obligation to fill those positions on an acting basis as needed within the budget constraints that he has. So there are discussions about that, but I won't speak to any kind of personnel disciplinary actions that may or may not be taken in police or any other department.
I guess my question is, are you aware of them? Yes?
Of course.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure. I didn't know if the reports I were getting were factual or they were true. It seems as though they are. I don't mean to prod into any details.
I would say, Madam Chair, to the councilor's point, and I appreciate what he says, and we are, as we are with all department heads, informed of any such action, pretty much right when it's being taken. There is misinformation. I've seen it on social media. I can't fix that. Don't believe everything you read, but those are the facts.
And I agree, there are budgetary restrictions, there are vacancies already in the superior officers, and I just would hope that there's real good cause for suspending multiple sergeants during the times that we're in. And if there isn't, I truly hope that the union does grieve and will take it from there. And I hope that your department handles it as you do. And that's all I had for Paul. Thank you.
Anybody else under request of councils? Council Ziegler?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to the Chief of Staff. During our last meeting, I raised inquiry as to where the mayor's office stood with regards to the census and putting together a complete count committee.
Can I respond?
Subsequently did send an email that you did not respond to, so can you?
And I apologize, because I was going to send you another email today, but I will tell you and the other councilors in person and to the public, the mayor is establishing, we're calling it a core committee, and it's a starting point of bringing together the relevant city departments. That meeting is actually going to take place on Wednesday. It's the initial meeting. The purpose of that meeting is to do what essentially this committee is tasked with doing, which is to come up with an expanded group of people. The Census Bureau, as you know, has a series of recommendations about community leaders, business leaders, nonprofits, various sectors that should be reached out to very aggressively. So the core group will meet on Wednesday, and it's comprised of the representatives of the city departments you would expect, the senior center, the city clerk, the mayor's office. I did have a conversation with the council chair about having a counselor serve, as well as the mayor is going to have someone from the school committee serve, as well as a representative of the school department. But that is just a core group to sit down and talk about who should be reached out to expand that group. And then that committee will, we've already notified the mayor-elect that we'll be setting that up. They'll start their work before he takes office, but it'll obviously continue. So I do apologize. I was going to send you an email today to confirm that, but that's how we're going to roll this out.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to Chief of Staff. Thank you for that update. I think it's extremely important that we continue to work on this because as I said last meeting, our ability to inform the public as to how they can fill out the census and to support them in filling out the census does have an impact on the grant dollars that we are eligible for. I would also say in that core group, I think it would be good practice to have someone from the library represented.
And I apologize, they are represented. Madam Chair, through you to Councilor Ziegler, there have been meetings in addition to this effort to form this committee. We had folks from the Census Bureau here and the library, and I'm glad you reminded me because they have been very much involved on their own as well as in the office, as has the senior center and the clerk's office. So it's that core group. The expansion is economic development, the mayor's office, the council, school committee, school department to try to broaden the core group that will then identify stakeholders to be included in the larger committee.
Thank you, and I'll just add that I do think it's a good idea to have representation from the council as part of that group, because I think as this body, we can definitely help to mobilize residents to fill out the survey once it's available.
And also, I apologize, I should have written all this down. The Housing Authority has also been included in that core group. The thinking is that there are folks who may be in city housing or who may, have connections to the Housing Authority who may be dealing with homelessness or being relocated or whatever. So the goal is, as you say, to make that group as inclusive as possible.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Councilor Finocchiaro.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could you tell us how far away, I know Councilor Vidler had mentioned the capital improvement plan and that we as a council haven't seen it yet. Where are we at in terms of a potential date? Is it going to be this year?
Madam Chair, through you to the councilor, the capital improvement plan is with the CAFO currently. She is reviewing it as well as looking at the list of projects. Some have changed. You just heard an example of a project that was on that list that has been escalated. So I'm not going to speak for the CAFO right now. I know that she's been working on it as well as a number of other things. I don't believe that it will be available immediately. I think there's a hope that it'll be available probably early in the next council's term to take actions relative to the FY21 budget.
You're gonna pinch your cheeks.
All right, thank you. The sooner the better, I think, so that we can, all start to read it and get on board there. So just a follow-up to a question that I do ask at each meeting, if there's been any updates with rectifying the vibrations in the Mystic Street, Webb Street area. I still do get complaints and requests for a resolution, so has there been any updates on that?
Madam Chair, through you to the councilor, and I believe the DPW director is still here. We have not been made, there is no new activity. The previous, we're talking about the DPW yard, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, the rock crushing activity has been completely ceased there. There is no new activity. I spoke to DPW today. They have not received any additional calls. So I guess what I would suggest is if there is an individual who has a specific concern, is they should contact either our office or the DPW director, because as of today, no such complaint was received. It's business as usual there, with the fact that the rock crushing is no longer taking place. So if there's a specific concern, I would strongly recommend it. Anyone listening, but particularly the constituent that's reached out to you, is contact us and let us know, because it's not something that the DPW department is aware of at present.
So I will reach out to them, because they are telling, it's a group of people, they are telling me that they have already reached out and continue to reach out to your office, so I will.
Well, they've never reached out to my office, so I would appreciate it if you would let them know to reach to the mayor's office with their name, address, and the specific concern. We do occasionally get calls that are not complete. Sometimes people leave calls with a phone number, or sometimes, frankly, they don't even leave a number. They just say, I'm a resident from this area, and the more specific, I mean, the complaint, which we ultimately addressed with the rock crushing, was residents in that area who brought a very specific concern. We worked with them and were able to resolve it. So I think that's helpful if you can have them contact us directly.
Sure, so I will find out what the issue is and with the miscommunication, and if need be, I'll walk it down to your office myself.
They can call anytime.
Okay. The other question that I had that wasn't answered from the last meeting is just a follow-up on the overspending of the school budget on that report that we received in July, and what the follow-up, and if the city council can get a list of what's been done, what still needs to be done, and continuing challenges, if any. So, that's something, whether it be something that the CAFO wants to address at a future meeting, with the school committee in the future, that was a request through your office that I've made continuously, and hopefully we will get that answered, unless you have an update at this point.
I don't have an update, Counselor, but I'm trying to remember, was this raised at the last meeting? Because I remember you talking about Triple E and about the DPW yard. I don't remember this specific issue, but it doesn't matter. I mean, the issue matters. It doesn't matter whether you raised it at the last meeting or not. The CAFO meets, I believe, with the superintendent every other week. They meet every other week to review the finances. She's involved intimately in all of the financial decisions on probably more of a daily basis than she wishes. Overall, right now, things are in good shape. But if there's a request for any specific information, I'm sure she would address that. Certainly, it could be addressed to our office. I know you have had quarterly meetings in the past with the school committee, so that may be a subject for those meetings as well. But if there's a specific concern, we'd be happy to address it. But I think you've seen a lot of improvement over this period of time, and the issues that were raised in the report continue to be addressed and rectified under the CAFO to the school department.
Well, thank you very much. This council was promised when we had this discussion about the audit that the follow-up would happen in writing and be specific as we go. So that's why I'm asking, and going back in my notes, I've asked at least 6 times this year. So I would appreciate by the end of the year a compilation as this administration is outgoing on what your perspective and what's been addressed specifically in the audit, what are the challenges that are ahead, so that the next council will have some continuation and understanding on what's been done and what hasn't been done. That would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Council Vidla.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have 2 requests. The first is in light of the discussion that we had tonight, which reminds me that this discussion has come up pretty much every year, but as the outgoing council, I think it may be helpful if through you, Chief of Staff, and the Mayor's office, if we could have Maggie Dupree, the CAFO, to actually create or assign to maybe Michelle or somebody else a budget setting factor document that could be memorializing what actually should be thought of when we are setting the budget. And I'm really thinking that this would be beneficial for the new council as also the residents, because when we do respond to residents' concerns and requests, and then we make decisions at budget time as a result, it then shows up 4 months later. And I was part of the counselors that voted no 2 years ago when we were told $50 during budget season for a tax increase that would be realized, and then it was $150 later. And we asked the questions, and there's the conversation that we had at that time also included, why are we so out of sync? Like, shouldn't they be discussions that we're having all at the same time, as far as, is there a way to synchronize the budget with the tax rate and when it's set? And I think if there's some sort of document that can be created for the benefit of the new council, that they're given at the beginning, and there's also discussions that I've had with them well before budget season. We want everyone to be able to be knowledgeable and progress forward in the right manner, and possibly, depending on the way the document looks, also post it online for residents so they understand when there are discussions about we need more money in X or Y, or for roads or for the schools, that there is an impact, and the impact won't be seen for at least 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, when you get your new tax bills and what have you. So,
Madam Chair, just through you, and Councilor, I know you have a second point, but the timing is very appropriate. We've had a conversation with the CAFO and even with the FSO about preparing an orientation, kind of a high-level budget, really addressing some of the issues that came up tonight, the connection between the discussion about the budget, the approval of the budget, and then subsequently the tax rate, and kind of how that all comes together. And I know that that's an issue that was addressed in the home rule petition. I know it's something that the FSO has mentioned to us and to you numerous times, and it's a very valid point. And I think, for the period of time the mayor's staying here, and just to be clear, which I know everyone here knows, but the discussion you're referring to relative to that tax rate, incident was under the previous mayor.
Correct. It was not under the current mayor.
Just
But
to
let me be
clarify.
clear. I don't think this should be a fiscal analyst's responsibility to prep the council coming in. I actually feel that it should be coming out of the accounting office.
Agreed, and that's what we had proposed, is that the CAFO, in conjunction with the FSO, certainly have the fiscal analyst be involved in that process, but come up with a process and an explanation as to
And
how
I
that
think
should
that's
work.
fine for the orientation, but what I'm really asking for is this concept to be memorialized in writing for the new council coming in on January 1, and then also to be made available online underneath the accounting department's website page, because it is something that is very valid and it will help everyone. It will stop phone calls from coming in, not all, but some phone calls from coming in to the mayor's office, to the accountant's office, to the council office, when people don't understand why.
I think the way, and I'm not going to speak for the CAFO, I won't be here, but I would envision this as being somewhat like a PowerPoint presentation that would be made to council, made publicly, and made available to have that level of detail, but not at such a granular level that you have to be a fiscal expert to understand it, but to understand the process better and how it works, how it all ties together. So we will instruct the CAFO, and again, the FSO has expressed an interest in being involved in that as well.
So thank you, and I think that sounds like a great idea from an orientation perspective, but what I'm really asking for is even a simpler document that does not go into a granular in the weeds, but something that says, you know, when you're talking about the budget, you have to remember this will then, if you're increasing the budget even a little, have an impact in November when
I think we're saying the same thing. That's the level that I envision it being at, is that it's in layman's terms for anyone to understand, but a clear document that council can then use to guide its own deliberations. And then to know that the impact of accepting a new growth number or accepting a certain % increase in the budget is going to have this potential ramification on the tax rate.
Thank you. Second item is in regards to the Merrimack River and the park that exists at Burnham and Riverside Drive. During the renovations that were made previously, it was raised to community development that we may want to consider putting signs next to the water's edge that says drinking water, so maybe people will not pollute the river as much if they understand that actually it's the drinking water source. I am formally making the request that this is something that the DPW department should be able to manufacture and install in relatively short time with little expense, because we can do this in-house. Putting up 2 signs, 4 signs could stop people and will stop people from actually polluting the river, considering the fact that we actually have our intake valve sitting right there. We all need to do our part in trying to reduce pollution in it. We have bigger issues, but this is something small that we should do. We see in other cities and towns, they mark actual sewer drains and water intake places that it's drinkable water and not to do it. I think we should do the same. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other requests of councilors?
Madam Chair, could I make a very brief announcement?
Very brief.
The Santa Parade, which will be taking place in 2 weeks. I don't have the date in front of me, but the announcement that I wanted to make was that the mayor has chosen co-marshals for the parade this year. They're 2 town officials, city officials who've spent a number of years in public service. One of them is school committee member Bob Vogler. The other is your colleague, Councilor Joyce Campagno.
Woo! Great choice. Thank you. Good choice.
Thank you, Paul.
Any other
And
business?
extend my thank you to the mayor.
When is it, Paul? When is the...
This
when
Saturday.
Is
3rd.
it's this Saturday?
It's this Saturday.
It's this Saturday,
At
the
1
23rd.
What time?
p.m.
Oh, yeah.
1 p.m.
You didn't get anything.
Paul, what time?
You We didn't get anything from the mayor's office.
Excuse me, Paul, just come up to the podium for 1 sec.
You
Yeah,
said
because,
it's been 2 weeks, so I just want to make sure.
because that's true, the Santa Parade, just say it, and then the councilors.
It is I believe it is the Saturday after Thanksgiving.
Oh, that's not this Saturday.
Right, it's
Correct?
not
No, it's the 23rd.
November
23rd, I'm sorry, I
23rd
should.
at 1
23rd
p.m.
is this,
I was excited to tell you about Joyce. I didn't have the date in front of me. I
And
apologize.
so that
What time is
everybody,
it?
1 p.m.
Thank you.
Santa Parade
Thank you,
is
Counselor.
November 23rd. Excuse me, Madam Chair, may I read this into the record? Thank you. Saturday, November 23rd at 1 p.m. Parade route starts on Pelham Street at Park and Ride, left onto Lowell, right onto Hampshire Street, cross over to Broadway to Charles.
Some kind of an email
It's not
from
after
the office?
thank you, thank you.
next week.
It's this
It was
week.
on the city website.
Okay.
It's not,
I mean, an email from the mayor's office telling
Right,
us.
any other business for the good and welfare of the community?
Unbelievable.
Madam Chair,
But, Council Ziegler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to wish my colleagues a happy Thanksgiving, since we will be meeting after Thanksgiving. I hope you have an enjoyable time with your families, and
Same to you.
all those in the community that celebrate, happy Thanksgiving to you all.
Thank you.
Same to you,
Motion to
Counselor.
adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion from Council Fiddler, second from Council Ziegler. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, unanimous.
You are now.